has been a little over a month since the Atlantis Leviathans lifted the hammer as your Season 8 Smite World Champions. Smite fans everywhere, it is my privilege and my honor to welcome you into Season 9 of Smite Pro action. This week, an absolutely loaded schedule. We have 6 teams already confirmed in the Smite Pro League. Throughout the course of this week and this upcoming weekend, we will send 2 more teams in to the SPL. Stakes could not be higher for these players who are here in studio live this week. And so happy Season 9 of SPL, everyone. My name is Dolson, and I cannot wait to bring you this action. Goremizer sitting along with me. And Gore, stakes high. The pressure is on to all these players. Play-ins week for the SPL.
This is, a lot of people are looking at this as pretty much like the second most important week of the year, with the first being the World Championship. That's going to happen way later on in the year, right? So this one has a lot of ramifications. It's really not an exaggeration to say, like, there are people who are literally going to have their lives changed if they get to qualify into it, right? You look at some of these teams, it wouldn't be maybe too surprising, but for a lot of these guys, being able to get a salary to play Smite professionally for a living, like that's a huge change. That's
right, and when we talk about giving the opportunity to all of these players, here is your schedule for the next couple of days, Wednesday and Thursday. And so we start off Samsara versus Thunderhead. Gore, that'll be our first matchup here. And I think important to mention, especially looking forward, we'll see the bracket here in just a minute, a double elim week as well, double elimination. So we will not knock any teams out today, but we will be sending teams down into that secondary bracket. So Samsara versus Thunderhead, that'll be our first matchup. Nobody's favorite. And reverse card we'll be playing a little bit later on. And then you see those kind of grouped up teams there in the middle, Fun Havers Neighborhood, and then Duck Club and Just F6. For these next couple of rounds, Gore, all best of threes, and then your qualifier game. So that's the quote, semifinals in the top right of the bracket there. That's a best of 5. And then the final round of the losers bracket will also be a best of 5. So best of 3s all week, best of 5s for the matches that will be sending teams on to the SPL. But why not get it started here, Gore? We've got a great one to send one team on to the next round. The winner of this one will play up against the Oni homies, who might be the favorites of this tournament. And Thunderhead is going to be the first team we talk about here all weekend long, Gore. And this is a team, a full Spanish team. Maybe it's the year of the Latin American Smite players. Leviathans won the Smite World Championships earlier on. And this Thunderhead team coming in with something to prove.
And this is a team that, again, you've seen a few of these guys playing throughout the last few years. You should recognize Czechio on this team. He is someone who has been playing Smite for a long time and has been very successful at this level of play in the SCC area. It is that question of whether or not this is the team that is then going to jump up forward with them, right? Because what we have seen out of the rest of them, Dark Wizard comes to mind as someone we got to see a few times last year, but everybody else has a little bit of question marks right behind them, right? They've played around. We've gotten to see them in some of these important matchups and play up against teams that we should recognize, like you see here, highlights up against Just F6. But it really does come to question how well they're going to be able to blend together. Czechio, if I remember correctly, and you can see here, was playing mid for a little bit, then swapped back over to carry. So it's not a role that is uncommon for them, but I think that that's something that we're going to have to kind of pay attention to throughout all this, especially because duo lane with that obelisk over there is very important right now.
I know. It feels like we've had all these smaller changes that have resulted in how, the builds, the meta, the rotations around the map, priority sides of the map, things like that. We're going to be learning a lot here this weekend. We haven't run it down yet, so I'll give you the Thunderhead roster here. Wengu, Ray Shadow, Mark, Dark Wizard, and Czechio is this Thunderhead roster. This is a team that has found some success at the SOC level, dipped some toes into the SCC at other points there as well. And I think that's going to be an important conversation piece, Score, especially early on in some of these matchups, is does the meta look wildly different? Remember, Atlas had come out towards the end of Season 8.
Yeah.
Could Atlas be making some waves here this weekend? And I imagine we're going to start to see the identities of some of these teams start to form as well. We have seen a wide variety of play styles at the SEC, the SOC level, and teams could be bringing a new play style into the SPL with some successful games this weekend. Let's start things off, though, with an interview. We mentioned Czechio in that pregame moment. I'm standing by with Czechio right now to chat a little bit about how he's feeling going into this one. Czechio, first off, congrats. Happy to have you here. Excited to see what you guys were able to do this weekend.
Thank you.
Talk to me a little bit about what Gore and I were just talking about. some changes in the game from Season 8 to where we are now. Do you feel like the meta from what we saw at Worlds is wildly different from what we'll be seeing here this weekend?
Well, definitely it's gonna change a bit. Not really much, I think. The starter, the way you play early games is gonna be different. Since Minute 4, you got the staff, you know, the new objective.
Sure.
Yeah, you gotta play a little bit around that. We're gonna play our play style, the way we're gonna play. We're confident we can win playing like we know. So yeah.
Well, talk to me a little bit about pressure, because this is something that we haven't seen in the last couple of years, the ability to play your way in to the Smite Pro League. Do you feel like yourself and your team is playing with a lot of added pressure this week, or you're going to come in and play your game?
No, we're chilling. Like, I mean, we're seed 8, I think. So no one really expects us to qualify, but we definitely have our chances.
You do. That's the beauty of this tournament. Every team has their chance, and it's about who's playing the best Smite at the right time. I'll let you go get back with your team, get ready for the game. Thanks for chatting with me.
Okay.
Best of luck.
Thank you.
I think that's a good mentality to have going into a matchup like this is, look, we're going to come in, we're going to play our game, and who knows? Look, I mean, you know, talk about like the Cincinnati Bengals, right? Nobody expected them to go to the playoffs, win the first round, the second round, third round, go to the Super Bowl. They certainly won that, right? I'm remembering that properly. The point
well, you know what? In the right world,
the point is,
that's a whole different conversation.
The point is, though, in tournaments like this, and I think Czechio's got a good mentality about it, is, you know, we come in as the 8th seed, but who knows? We're going to play our game of Smite.
Yeah.
You find yourself maybe a couple of upsets, depending on what your seeding is, and you're playing in the SPL next year.
I went on to, what is this, the Backliners, Agres podcast last night, and like one of the things that I remember saying and talking about was like, there are a few of these teams that like, if you're looking at them, you're probably not looking at them as maybe your next SPL team, right? You've seen what they've done in the past, and you don't know how they're going to work. But realistically, what you're looking at is a team that's going to upset somebody, right? Like, this is a team that has a chance, whether or not it's going to be, you know, their chance to jump into the top 2, that's going to be determined by whether or not they can also upset some of these other top teams. And I think that's really the big starter is like, you know what? You're coming in, you don't have this amount of pressure on your shoulders to qualify, but you could ruin somebody else's chances, and that makes yours even better. That's
right. The team hoping to avoid their chances being ruined up against this Thunderhead roster is Samsara, the other team that we have in this first matchup. This is a team with some recognizable names as well, Gore. You got Snatty, Jangaru, Briz, Privative, Shinigami, and Taco, of course, will be coaching this team. This is a team that has seen some SEL level play, or SEC rather, and SEL level play in the past. And so probably coming into this match as slight favorites, but it's really all down to who's prepped the most. But this is absolutely a team where I think viewers and ourselves as well can look and say, we've seen what these guys can do in the past.
Well, and this is I think the biggest thing, the fact that they have that competitive experience already is a huge plus for a lot of players, just because you get to come into this, you already know what it's like to be there on game day, understand what mentality you have to be in, especially because this has been a team that has been incredibly relaxed with each other. Like, you can tell they all get along really well, and that's something that I think really is going to lend itself in game when it starts to come into this conversation of how well are they playing this meta, what are they doing. Plus, you've got people that are constantly grinding. Like, there is almost a guarantee you are going to run into these guys in your ranked queues at any given time during the day, and that is going to really showcase itself today. And I think that's exactly what we're going to be able to see, is just a team that knows what they're doing, and that's going to be a little frightening for Thunderhead.
I think it is worth mentioning, Gore, and this is more of a fun fact than anything else, is that Jangaru's playing on a controller.
Yeah.
And I think only 1 or 2 players this entire event will be playing on a controller. And to be clear, that's how Jangaru normally plays Smite.
Yes.
That's not a suddenly we're swapping to this for the play-in event style of choice. More of a fun fact than anything else. But I agree, Gore. I think team chemistry is going to be massive for this Samsara team moving forward. And a very important player on the Samsara team is Privative, who is standing by for the pregame interview. First and foremost, Priv, thanks for coming into the studio. We're excited to see what you guys have got in store for us this weekend. I want to pick up right where Gore and I left off. How important do you think the team chemistry is with you guys? You think the meshing of minds works well, and your game plan is all pretty clear across the board?
Yeah, we've been together a pretty long time. Me, Ron, Snatty. Apparently, like we're like the best of friends. So I mean, no matter how bad we do, if we're horrible together. So.
Do you think that relieves some pressure for a weekend like this? You know, it's so important. The way that this weekend works, playing into the SPL. Do you think having a team full of best friends like that relieves a little bit of pressure on what are otherwise huge games?
Yeah, it definitely does. Because when scrims go bad, I'm very like animated,
right.
like when you laugh, because I'm just like, look, you're horrible, but it's okay. And you know, they just laugh. We laugh it off, move on.
Sure.
You know, we don't really take anything too bad because you know we just keep working and see improvement, and you know, it can go up from there. So
it's a great way to be. There are teams in the SPL that are all best of friends, and they have massive success. Privative, thanks for standing by. I'll let you get back with the team and get ready for your matchup.
But I want those SPL people spot.
That's right. You'll be going for it. Privative looking to play in the SPL a little bit later on this year. Got to move on from the first round up against this Thunderhead team. And I like that mentality. Look, I mean, I look at like the Olympus Bolts, right? That's a team who feels like just a bunch of great friends who play Smite together, and they're one of the best teams we have in the SPL. And especially in a weekend like this, you know, double elim, you're in the first round right now. A little bit of that pressure can roll off, right? If you lose this first round match, you're not out yet.
Yeah.
Clearly, you want to make your road a little bit easier for yourself and stay in that upper bracket. But you're going to take some lumps this weekend. And so the ability to, as a team, take a deep breath, regroup, and move on, massively important.
I do love that we got, I think, a little bit like both mindsets from the players, right?
Yep.
We got the, you know what, we're coming in as 8th seed. Whatever happens, but this is going to be fun for us. We'll see what we can do. And then we got the, no, I'm going for that spot. Like, that's mine. I'm taking it, and I'm going to earn it. And so it's going to be interesting to see if, I mean, they can play up to that, right? I think I'm really excited to see what this Thunderhead roster is able to do because we know that they've played together. They know they have a little bit of competitive experience. But the Samsara team on the other side is the one that, you know, like they just said, you've got a few players that have been hanging out together for years at this point who know each other really well. You've got Taco coaching them, and I do think like it's always important to talk about whenever you have someone that is able to. I mean, you have to look at the Solar Scarabs is a really good example just because it's like sometimes picks and bans is like where your team can suddenly skyrocket in terms of power. If you know what you're going to go for, if that guy on the other side has a signature pick and you can get rid of it immediately, it really does kick that door open. And that's the other thing about these teams. You look at some of them, Just F6 comes to mind, you look at the Oni homies, there's countless footage on these dudes that you can watch. You're going to know how they play and you're going to know what gods they like. Go watch like the 3 Thunderhead games that you're going to be able to find. Like, there's not as much homework that you can do to find and really counter out these guys.
Gore, as a total side note, it is going to be. This is the test of professionalism, calling the Oni Warriors because the
formerly known as Oni Warriors.
Right, they're not the Oni Warriors this weekend.
No.
They want their spot back.
They want to be the Oni
But calling them the Oni homies instead of the Oni Warriors is going to be the peak test of our professionalism and a challenge to say the least. Picks and bans for game number 1 of the SPL Season 9 play-ins kicking off right now. And already, Gore, some Bastet priority in the ban column, Gilgamesh and Odin as well. Odin got one of my favorite skins added into game here recently. And then Umoja taken off the board. So we've got some control and some CC banned away. And then Bastet, that's kind of a carryover from the end of Season 8. Lots of Bastet at Worlds.
Yeah.
Won't be seeing her in our first game, at least.
Well, and I think there's a lot to be said about Bastet, but also knowing that you can hit that ult through walls is still just absolutely frightening to me. Like, whenever she's in the game, it's almost like enough to, like, you're just on edge whenever you know that she's nearby. And I think that's going to open up a lot. The thing that actually surprises me the most, I was expecting to see a lot of very heavy-handed, like, potential Atlas play because of the buffs that he got going into Season 9. When he was released, a little shakier in terms of the power and what he was able to contribute. But now when you see what he can bring, it is honestly really controlling for a lot of that. But he's going to get just completely thrown off to the side.
And, Gore, I think worth mentioning, just kind of as an overarching theme, luckily, we're not on the cast for this first one because there's so much.
There's way too much to try and talk about.
You got the upgraded relics. I mean, there's 2 options for all of
like
those. Glyphs now on a bunch of the items in the item shop. You got the.
Hey, you remember that Draugr? He's gone.
Yeah, the Draugr's gone. The Gold Fury just spawns now. You don't have to kill a
you know everything that you used to know about Scorpions? They're different.
Well, maybe it's the easiest time of year for us to cast because there's always
so much,
something to be talking about. At any rate, we'll catch back up a new to the ban column. Ban here is Amaterasu, not used to seeing her there. Serket and Cerberus going to be the first 2 picks for Samsara on the left side, and then Thunderhead over on the right, Ardio and Sol. So that not unlike what we've seen here towards the end of Season 8. Gore, Ardio, highly prioritized at World. Sol saw some play as well. And so I think Thunderhead getting some great picks here in this current meta.
Especially considering what you can see. I think itemization-wise, like Sol right now just does a lot of damage for your team and can provide a whole ton while staying safe and healthy throughout a majority of that. We've seen what Ardio can do in the right hands. Whenever anybody is playing her, she gets very controlling into your backline and is very, very adept at slowing things down, especially when you look at the Serket, as an initial lock-in. I would not be surprised if we see another assassin get locked in for Samsara and that ends up being like a Serket over in the support role or something like that, just because we've seen a lot of high mobility, and again, dual lane being very important. Pressure over there is going to be pushed to the max. It also might just be a comfort pick, and I might be getting ahead of myself, which is entirely possible. But if you added that with an Izanami, you are going to control the dual lane early on. Honestly, Izanami alone is enough to give you a lot of pressure for that. Plus, we get to see, I think, a nice little counter in this, well, let's say, like, quote-unquote counter, and the Cerberus taking on the Ardio, at least something that can handle her a little bit better. But I think that is something that Thunderhead have really been able to set themselves ahead with by picking up.
We've seen, and you talk about niche picks, kind of pocket picks, whatever that might be. We've seen Cerberus players, when played at the top level, Cerberus absolutely has the ability, not only in the laning phase score, but to take over team fights and set up so well.
Didn't Mika get a quadra kill?
That's what I'm
Cerberus
thinking,
last year?
Like even outside of support, like solo lane Cerberus was absolutely a thing.
It's kind of nuts and good.
I do want to ask, this is a bit of a side note, Gore. Is it a refreshing feeling for you in your spreadsheets to start a new year? I mean, we're at the beginning of Season 9, like all of your sheets are empty.
That's exactly what it is. It's empty, and so it doesn't take like 5 minutes to load everything.
to load and scroll over
where
all
it
this
has
stuff.
to be like, hey man, there's a literal year's worth of data in here to look through.
That's
like,
right.
No. There's nothing.
We're going to be adding one more year worth of data. Who will be the 2 more teams joining that data at the SPL and in the SPL spreadsheet for Gore Miser remains to be seen. We'll find out by the end of this weekend. Medusa, also a pick, Gore, that saw a little bit of play towards the end of Season 8. We wondered with Crusher was such a popular starter item. The changing of the way Medusa applies anti-heal also changed up a little bit. And so a slight increase in play. I wouldn't say was the meta, but people still did enjoy Medusa in the duo lane.
And I honestly think she still has a lot going for her, especially at a draft like this. First off, you've got a lot of self-sustain on the side of Thunderhead, a lot of capabilities to keep your team alive, from the Ardio, but Sol and Camazotz are really good at keeping themselves going. But Medusa opens up a conversation because she brings in a little bit of anti-heal that helps deal with the Cerberus. It helps shut down any of the lifesteal that Izanami might be picking up. But also she just gets a little more powerful. Her ult is very strong. I like what Medusa can bring into the middle of a fight. Even if her peak is still kind of in that mid-game area, I think she's been more adept the last few months that we've seen her.
Well, Gore, maybe our question's a bit answered here. Athena locked in as well as the Cerberus. I would argue we've seen Athena more in support than we have over in the solo lane. Granted, Serket has also been played support, and we have seen Athena jungle. Things could get
Is Cherry
a little interesting. Thoth locked in for Samsara as well. So let me ask you a question here, Gore. I look at Serket, Cerberus, Athena, even Thoth, if you consider that route. They've got plenty of lockdown, plenty of setup, plenty of CC, whether single instance or over an AoE area. Are you concerned about the CC or lack of that Thunderhead has over there on their draft?
Yes, only because Ardio, early on is going to be not in any of these engagements, right? So you're looking at your very initial fights lacking most of the massive cripple field that she can bring, a lot of the CC that she's going to be able to apply. You've got a stun from Finmir that is determined on not only his passive, but also hitting the jump.
Right.
And then a lack, the slows, I guess technically a route for Medusa, but a lot of those stuff, I was going to say, if you're using some of these as your CC, then something's going dramatically wrong for you. So you've got taunt, you've got stuns, you've got so much on the side of Samsara that's going to cause a lot of trouble for Thunderhead, and I think it's going to cause trouble immediately. I also think it's worth mentioning that Thoth is someone that has been mentioned and talked about over the last couple of days as being a very important, like, admittedly, it's really hard to determine because sometimes he's just absolutely this ranked destroyer, and then he goes into competitive and it's still Thoth and they just kill him dead. But I do think he's someone to be worried about here, especially having that damage from long range with such easy setup in front of him. I think Samsara have a really, really solid draft to start this thing off.
I mean, worth mentioning that there are a couple characters on the Thunderhead team a little slipperier. You look at Camazot's Bat Out of Hell, good for avoiding
they don't
a lot
die
of that
easy.
CC. They don't die easily. Fenrir with the Ragnarok as well. Ideally, you're using that for some setup, but if you really need to, the CC immunity to get out of some of the lockdown that Samsara has is there as well. And so I think, Gore, you're right. Thoth is going to be so important here for Samsara and dealing a lot of that damage. Got to be careful of Fenrir and the Ragnarok and jumping in to those fights. And if Thoth and the positioning is good enough and the peel is good enough from Samsara, I might give my edge to Samsara here with their draft in game 1.
It is also worth talking about because we're on bonus, so just like small nerfs, but like Fenrir got a 10-second nerf to his ult. You've got a little bit of, I think, of cooldowns there on Camazot's as well. Izanami was hit, but when you look at the two assassins that are really going to be the driving force for Thunderhead, they aren't hitting quite as hard as the last time we saw them or as they were at the beginning of the season. So that's something that they're going to have to try and factor into this. Specifically, that 10 seconds. It feels like something that's not big, but it changes so much in the middle of the game.
Well, Gore, SPL Season 9 plans. Let's kick it off. Game 1, Samsara versus Thunderhead.
What a big way to start it off. We got some of the top SOC in Thunderhead coming here, and they're facing off against Samsara for some of our first matchups of the weekend. And we've got a lot of them going on here. It's J-Mac Tucker and Mifflin going to be joining me here as we get ready to go into game number 1 between these teams. And I think Gormeiser brought up a really big point here for Thunderhead. A couple of their gods on this roster have seen some slight nerfs in this 9.1 balance, most notably the Fenrir and the Camazots.
Yeah, but I think the nerfs that we're seeing towards Thunderhead's draft really aren't enough to shift up how you're playing these guys, or if you're really evaluating their power levels within the meta. I think that we're not really concerned about the Fenrirs of the world. We're not concerned about the Camazots. They're going to do the exact same things that we can expect. But more so, I'm interested in keeping my eyes on the power curve of Thunderhead. You'd expect Camazotz to be able to get involved a little bit earlier on than this Surcat. I'm thinking the second that Jotuns is going to get finished, I'm definitively calling that it is likely going to be the Jotuns for Camazotz. Where is he going to put his pressure? Does he want to head towards mid, try and slow down this Thoth? Does he want to work his way towards the duo lane, put some pressure onto Shinigami? Keep your eyes on both junglers. I'm very curious to see the pathing.
And definitely keep your eyes on this Thoth as well. It's a guy we don't see very much. We saw him kind of peek his head in during the Worlds playoffs, that qualifying stage. Saw him come up a little bit and had mixed levels of success. This Fenrir eating a lot of damage early on. A double dash in, Shell is forced, Dark Wizard is low. One more basic is all that's needed. But Shinigami can't get the damage out there. Dark Wizard sneaks by and avoids the first blood.
But loses out on the Shell, loses out on a lot of potions, and loses out on some of that jungle farm as well. Samsara's duo lane off to a roaring start, and you would expect Czechio to get out pressure.
Primitive with a taunt against Dark Wizard forces yet another leap out of the support. And this is kind of what Gore was alluding to, is the main CC of this Fenrir requires you to leap in. Well, now that Dark Wizard is forced to leap out every single time, they don't have that same level of pressure with the CC and duo.
Yeah, just by nature, Fenrir wants to be the one initiating these fights. He wants to be the one on the forefront, but instead, being dropped so low in HP, he doesn't really have that opportunity. Any DPS trade he takes up against Primitive or Shinigami likely just gets outvalued because Dark Wizard is running low on resources. Man's got 1 potion left.
Dash in and a taunt onto Czechio, slowed down by the Spectral Projection, and now a rotation in from Jengaru. Leap out by Dark Wizard, taunt is good, and Jengaru will strike first blood to put Samsara on the board.
When I walked in today, J-Mac, I saw Primitive, and he looked at me, he whispers under his breath, because Thunderhead was right across the room, he says, "I'm so sorry for what I'm about to do to these people." And you know what? He should be. So far, Primitive has controlled the pace of the duo lane, creating the situation where Jengaru can get involved. Shinigami has been able to leverage his pressure incredibly well. Dark Wizard on this Fenrir is a win condition. He's a win condition. You need your Fenrir support to perform well. And as of now, Dark Wizard has not been allowed to play.
Dark Wizard doesn't get to play Smite right now, and Thunderhead are on the back foot immediately because of that first blood for Samsara. And Mifflin, I'm going to be honest, I'm surprised it's taken so long for us to see Athena. I mean, Dash Taunt is just such a strong initiation. The fact that Taunt is also AoE, it really just kind of baffles me that we haven't seen her nearly as much because she can just keep going in and doing this every single time.
All right, well, here's the thing.
Okay.
Not often are you going to find the double taunt literally every time you dash forward. Privative has just gotten a really good eye of the initiator. That's why I like to say when support's able to find these opportunities consistently. But the main weakness of Athena is the fact that if you're starting a fight around your Athena, your ultimate loses out on a lot of value, and it's very easy to exploit the early.
One more time, and the Dark Wizard, he'll leap away, but not quite the direction he wanted to go. But Ray Shadow is here to try and turn the tides for Thunderhead. Shinigami forced down low. The shell is used. Bat out of hell will be enough to help take him down. Dark Wizard is the one who strikes the kill, and maybe he can get a second one. It's Ray Shadow to grab him, and Thunderhead turn it around to the duo.
Jengaru hovering nearby. Still level 4, does not have the ultimate available, but might not need it in the 1v1.
Jengaru misses the taunt up against Czechio, and he'll get into the separate, and out will go the Hunter. Jengaru out of mana. After those abilities, he'll be forced to go right back to base. But Thunderhead, after being pushed on the back foot for the first 3 minutes of this game, one nice rotation from Ray Shadow turns that one right around.
Yeah, Ray Shadow doing a very good job farming up in the jungle, rotates into the duo at level 5, and if you've got that ultimate available, you can do just about no wrong on Camazotz. Is able to turn around that fight very easily. Gotta wonder what Jengaru is doing. He's slow on the rotation as well as behind in levels.
It looked like he was maybe back towards his speed buff. We see the initial jump out by Dark Wizard, and this is where we thought that maybe Samsara could turn the fight around, but Ray Shadow makes a quick rotation in. Dark Wizard gets his shell back up just in time for this fight to happen, and they're able to turn around and pick up 2 quick kills and put Thunderhead right in the lead. And Dark Wizard, less than 20 health by the end of that rotation there. Great patience out of the support from Thunderhead.
And he still wants to get involved yet again. Dark Wizard working his way through the jungle. Thought maybe we would see an engagement there, considering Czechio's ultimate's available, but instead, he's got his eyes on Purple.
Purple started up. The ultimate expended from Czechio to try and secure it, and it doesn't seem like he was able to. And now we get a first look at the brand new obelisk on the map. Once that 4 minutes hits, the obelisk spawns up, and a bunch of those camps start enhancing. You see the gold rings around the ones. And then in both of the side lanes, you get a couple of little snake minions that drop down. Killing those will also grant a Lotus, as we see highlighted there by Shinigami. But you can always go up to that enemy obelisk, stand around it, expend a decent chunk of your health bar, but you can also steal their flowers away and maybe go for another rotation. Taunts in on the Dark Wizard. The silence is good. And a jump in by Jengaru, but he won't find anything yet. Czechio does get the ultimate on top of him, and Jengaru will blow him up. A nice turnaround kill for Samsara. Ray Shadow jumps in, but has to use the bat out of hell to get himself right back out.
Man, just tough stuff. Yet again, Thunderhead caught on the back foot on this rotation. Just great plays from Privative individually, who has refused to leave this lane for the first 5.5 minutes, finding consistent taunts, consistent initiation that has been followed up beautifully by the rest of Samsara. But taking a peek at the gold, the experience, Thunderhead are doing a good job elsewhere on the map, controlling the macro, controlling the neutral. Mid camps have been getting split generally 50-50. So despite Samsara's dual lane getting off to a very nice start, about a 1-level lead for Shinigami and about a half for Privative, Thunderhead is staying afloat everywhere else on the map. That said, Gold Fury now spawning at the 5-minute mark means that pressure can go somewhere.
Briz under fire in the mid. Crusher plus might be a little bit enough. Not quite. Briz does go down. Ray Shadow, credit to the kill. Privative is surrounded by 3 and cannot find a path in. Good stun by Dark Wizard. And Privative has absolutely nowhere to go. The tier 1 tower is not safe for the support. And Dark Wizard will be the one who picks him up.
What a massive turnaround for Thunderhead. Just catching out that Thoth early on. And up against a Fenrir, you don't really have the greatest options as Thoth to deal with him, as well as Camazotz being able to stick to you incredibly easily. But silver linings where they lie for Samsara. They do have the obelisk spawned up. They can pick up that scepter and just kind of work the map.
Wengu now finally seeing some action on the right side of the map. He'll be thrown back by the last breath from Jengaru. Snatty will breathe on him, and Jengaru will be credited for the last hit. But as you talked about there, Mifflin, the obelisk has now been activated, and it's now been filled up, and has dropped down the Indra Scepter onto Privative. There's many different, little pseudo names that have come around. Jimmy, the scroll, the scepter, whatever you might want to call it. It does look like a scroll, but it will be the Indra Scepter. A nice little buff to anybody who does have that on them. HP 5 aura for your allies. Can heal your towers, which we'll get to see maybe a little bit of that there in the mid lane. It's the only one that's really weakened. or if you're around enemies, deals a nice little bit of damage.
Yeah, a little bit or a lot of it. I think it's more so a lot. It really does shore up your support's damage. Privative is now an individual threat on the map. The taunt's going to set up probably 2-3 ticks of that scepter, doing about 80 damage per tick as well, meaning that if you're standing near this Athena, you're probably just losing the fight. Privative is a major threat now, and I'm sure Thunderhead would love to be able to shut him down before he gets too much value from this item.
To kind of go back onto the solo laners, an item that we haven't seen for such a long time from Season 8, but is now making a return here in Season 9 thanks to its upgrades. Teleport picked up and fully upgraded to the Persistent by both teams. We'll talk more on that after this fight because Mark goes in with a nice ultimate. Jangaru picks up one, but the shell has been expended by Dark Wizard to negate the majority of that last breath poison. And just as quickly as the fight starts up, it will slow right back down.
That was a high engagement cost for Thunderhead, costing them both Mark and Dark Wizard's ultimates. So their team fight takes a major hit, whereas Samsara only have to expend Circuits. They still have the ability, Samsara that is, to group up and maybe force an engagement around these mid camps or potentially even the Gold Fury itself. But to speak to your point, yeah, we're going to see a lot more teleport, I think, throughout the entirety this year. Persistent is just so strong as a utility tool. Every time you pick up a kill or an assist, it reduces the cooldown on that relic, meaning that you're going to be everywhere on the map. It's like anime. They're just wherever you want to be. Sorry, kid, I'm behind you.
Now, sometimes you can maybe see a relic dagger, though I don't think that we will see it in that solo lane. Could drop that another big chunk and reduce the cooldown even further, but maybe not so likely when it comes to these two solo laners picking that one up. Kind of going into the mid lane here, a little bit of a rise of Thoth, kind of going back to him. We talked about him earlier, how we kind of saw him for a little bit during Worlds qualifiers, mixed levels of success. But now that we're seeing this kind of double flat pen meta coming back in for these mid laners, Thoth has really been on the rise.
Yeah, it's just a really good power curve for Thoth. The second he finishes up that secondary item, Thoth always dealing a ton of damage, just like Shinigami up against Czechio, takes him out in his own purple buff, and you can see it. Shinigami, he's pretty happy with that one. Saw the smile on his face.
Shinigami with that Crusher and now working towards the Atalanta's bow after its buff. So we'll be seeing a lot of extra damage coming out of this Izanami. Meanwhile, on the opposite side, Czechio only had that Ring of Hecate to himself, and Wengu once again will see some fighting over on this right-hand side. Defender of Olympus and Wengu gets a nice double stun, but he misses the one who's doing the damage right to him. Snatty picks up the kill in solo. It puts Samsara up 5-4 on the kills, but not super far up in the gold. It's only a few hundred gold separating them.
You know, I really like that call from Samsara to commit so much to the right side of the map because of what we see on the screen right now. Had Shinigami not taken out Czechio on his own, there's pretty high risk that Thunderhead could have just gone to Gold Fury. But with this soul removed from the map, individually by Shinigami, you can commit everything to the right-hand side of the map. And that's exactly what Samsara does, just pushing that lead a little bit further forward. But as you said, paltry sums as of now.
Greater Scorpion here will be stolen by Thunderhead to remove that one from the side of Samsara and negate some of that experience and enhancing those buffs. Those Scorpions specifically have been changed up from wins past, where instead of going back and forth between different spawn points, you now both get one on each side of your jungle to try and enhance your own camp. So it looks like both of them end up getting stolen by their respective teams.
Yeah, just trading out farm wherever they can elsewhere on the map. I'm curious to see now how Czechio decides to address this lane. He's already realized that he's not really winning the 1v1. Shinigami, having finished up Atalantis, has got a good deal of lifesteal. He's got crit, he's got power, he's got everything he needs from that item. I think Czechio's gonna have to sit on the back foot for a little while.
And they're gonna be seeing a lot of this kind of action over the course of the weekend. This fight around the obelisk, Dark Wizard wanted to stop Privative from stealing a couple of those Lotus Flowers, but two did manage to get stolen away by the Samsara support. And that obelisk is looking mighty low now for the side of Thunderhead. Samsara just need a couple more, and maybe a couple kills on top of that. Ray Shadow forced away. The Petrify from Mark is good, but the taunt from Jangaru is even better. Privative will continue the dash through, and Mark has absolutely nowhere to go. Just needs to wait a couple of seconds longer for some help, but he will not get it. And it's Breeze is the one to take him down. Meanwhile, Snatty, with the teleport to the left side of the map, has made himself known, and he'll shut down Czechio instantly under his own tower. A pull back in on Wengu should spell the end for the solo laner.
It's going to be a dash in and a taunt. Briz, credit for the kill, and the entire team rotating to the left-hand side of the map for Samsara. Hits pay dirt. Where can they go now? Dark Wizard, the only one hovering nearby. Ray Shadow, no ultimate available, but is making his way over. I don't love their odds, Thunderhead that is, in this fight around the gold.
Gold started up, and it is Ray and Wizard here to try and hold them back. Not full committing to it just yet.
Oh, really?
And in fact, it looks like Samsara will back away. Just the damage and the CC threat alone from Thunderhead is enough. But we were talking about the power of that teleport. Snatty teleports that left side to fight, and look at that. With 3 kills to his name, or 3 kills/assist in that fight, it's already right back off a cooldown. He can put himself wherever he wants to go, right back on the map.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a ridiculous relic, man. The ability to control pacing, control where you are on the map, make sure that you're always where your team needs you, be it around an objective or around a team fight, is just so valuable. But we can see the double-edged sword that is Persistent Teleport from the other solo laner. Wengu also rotates in towards that fight. His is still on cooldown. The fight didn't seem to go so well for Thunderhead. So if you do dedicate that relic for a rotation and you don't hit pay dirt, you're kind of sitting duck for a little while.
I think one of the more interesting things to note here is that neither of the support have gone for Gauntlet of Thieves, which is kind of the premier starting item for supports all last season. Wengu will be aggressed on one more time in that solo lane. He'll eat a couple of ultimates, quite a bit of damage. He's holding out for now, but I don't think he's got too much further that he can go. The stun is nice, but he's really just buying time out here. But kind of going back on this Gauntlet of Thieves, man, we really just aren't seeing it here, at least in this very first game. Instead, it's at Sovereignty and a Runeforged Hammer first by Dark Wizard.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. Runeforged for Fenrir are going to do a lot of damage, but maybe not the most defense as he's forced into his own tower. Privative forced to step back, and it's another solo for Shinigami? Okay.
Now, quick beads out of Briz will get him away from the Petrify from Mark, but Mark will sidestep the final judgment from the Thoth, but he's still eating all the damage from the tanks under the tower, but the tanks now need to run because they've soaked up quite a bit. Huge stun on the Dark Wizard. Almost takes him out, but now Ray Shadow's caught in the middle of 3. He'll pick up Priv and maybe be able to make it out. No, he will not. The breath from Snatty is good enough.
What a phenomenal trade. Privative, with his last breath, is able to launch out that taunt and make sure that there's a return kill for his team. If it got lost in the confusion, yes, Shinigami yet again takes out Czechio. Czechio not even given the opportunity to shoot off his own ultimate, and Dark Wizard narrowly escapes death. He's inside his own tower, and he has to jump as the support just to avoid a little bit of damage before he heads back to base.
I can't say that's a little bit of damage. You saw how much it did to him last time. You see how
Like
much it's doing
much.
to the mid laner.
Yeah, a
Maybe
lot.
put him kind of towards half health, throw him right back into the clutches of Thoth, and
See
Jingaru
ya.
will block the path to set up for the mid laner to get the kill. And what was kind of a slower start here, what was a small gold lead up by Samsara, has now exploded to nearly 5,000 gold, 7,000 experience. We get a nice little look one more time at another solo kill by Shinigami. This man over here in that solo lane, or in that dual lane, I should say, feels like a solo lane at this point. He's popping off.
And Shinigami's not even getting lucky, man. There was that one crit throughout that entire fight. That looked exactly like the last solo kill. Czechio needs to drop some wards defensively there. He's been caught out at his own purple buff twice now, which has costed his team mightily in this neutral territory fight. So now Samsara, playing with a massive lead that they've netted just from kills because no neutral objectives have fallen as of yet, have created a situation where they could just go ahead and do it. Group up on the gold free, force the advantage while you've got it, and make Thunderhead walk into you.
Now, Obelisk does get picked up one more time by Samsara's support, so Priviv will have the scepter around his waist, or floating around him at least. Give him that little bit of extra damage, allows him to kind of clear out these camps. One of the big boosts there for the supports, they finally can get the damage they need to clear camps by themselves.
Look, they don't deserve it, man.
What are you talking about?
already the tankiest people on the map. You want them dealing damage too? My man soloed oracles. That shouldn't happen. No way. Primitive's too strong.
Well, Dark Wizard's going to need a lot of help here, but none will come. Instead, it will be Snatty and the rest of Samsara collapsing on the support of Thunderhead, set up for a kill, and the first major neutral objective of the game going the way of Samsara. Gold Fury goes down, but Thunderhead make a quick response, head over to this Pyromancer, and they'll drop it just as quick.
You know what? I went on my spiel that supports don't need help. They need help. Dark Wizard got evaporated on the map, and I think his team is going to follow him.
I think Mark needs a little bit of help, too. These tanks are going right for the throat. Mark has nowhere to go. Jangaru gets the last hit. Ray Shadow, as soon as he lands out of the bat out of hell, he's got to blink out. And Samsara now up 14-5 on the kills. And what was barely 5,000 earlier has now gone up to about 7,000 gold, and maybe even make it a fire giant on top. So we went from having not a single neutral objective taken until 15 minutes to all of a sudden 3, but Dark Wizard is here to try and hold that one out. But Final Judgment is more than enough to secure it, and Privative barely squeaks himself by there. Jingaru helps turn around, kill the support, and the fire giant will go to Samsara.
Gotta give credit to Dark Wizard for that warrior's spirit he just put on full display. It takes a a lot of bravery to be willing to jump into 5 people. What did you say? 8,000 gold down at the time on your own when you're already 2 levels down, don't even have that secondary relic available. And he nearly takes away the Fire Giant, but Samsara, superior clear and space control, are able to net themselves the largest neutral objective on their first step towards qualifying themselves into the SPL. And now Thunderhead, with a decent team comp for defending around these tier 2s, defending around the Phoenixes, have to struggle against a massive lead of Samsara. You're looking at Czechio to do a lot of the heavy lifting here. If Mark isn't landing massive ultimates, I'm not sure how strong their defense is.
Just leave him alone.
Oh, no.
Snatty uses his teleport to come over and just bully Czechio in the duo lane and take another 10 seconds off the cooldown of that relic as he makes that rotation. They get the kill and then continue to push up this left side. No towers for safety for Czechio any longer. It's only the Phoenix on this left side.
I'm out here trying to weave tales on how Thunderhead's going to defend. Czechio was the win condition on the defense, and he's gone for the next 20 seconds. Better believe Samsara is going to make use of that time. Looks like they're just waiting on this minion wave to catch up with them before they start this siege on the left side Phoenix. I guess now you got to hope Ray Shadow can do it himself.
We're going to need Dark Wizard, but you're not going to get Dark Wizard. Briz erases him off the map. Final Judgment does more than enough damage. Ray Shadow tries to hold them back with a bat out of hell, but will only delay the inevitable as Samsara regroup, and they'll have to wait for yet another minion wave to come through. But Dark Wizard was there, and then he wasn't.
Hey, but he bought time for Czechio to come back, and Samsara put some respect on Czechio when he's inside his own Phoenix. When he's alone in the lane, it's pretty easy for Snatty to walk up and find that solo kill, essentially. So instead, now Samsara, instead of grouping up, going for the bird, they're going to go ahead and clear out the rest of the map. Why leave it up to Risk? Tier 1 mid tower, that's easy. Tier 2, foregone conclusion. Wouldn't be surprised if we see them work their way over towards that right-hand side, and then spend up this gold lead, which has very quickly become massive.
Taunton onto Wengu, and an ultimate from
Surely
Jengaru.
not.
That's going to get the beads out of Wengu. He will get away. Dark Wizard at half health inside of his own ultimate. Final Judgment started, but canceled right away. As Ray Shadow, again, the one to deter them back over near the speed buff, he will go to try and get away. That Phoenix has already eaten half of its health and damage from Samsara, but it'll be a quick retreat from them, as they don't want to commit too much more.
Man, that is crazy. Thunderhead responds properly. They drag Privative forward, but Privative's too tanky at this point.
Privative goes in. He'll find one with the taunt because the beast from Ray Shadow, but that one is all that he needs. Doesn't matter how many defenses you have. It doesn't matter how many players you have. If you want to run the conveyor belt at Samsara, they are more than happy to take that trade. And they're going to go all the way to the Titan room without even having a Phoenix down, making a nice and easy 4. And Czechio, the last man standing, will not be standing much longer as Shinigami picks up a triple kill to essentially end the game here in game number 1 for Samsara.
Game 1's a duo chasm, J-Mac. There's no other way to word it. Shinigami's finding solo kills on cooldown. Privative found double taunts literally every 5 seconds for the first 5 minutes of this game. Thunderhead, I think it's clear we need to address in the P's and B's going into game 2. You cannot allow Samsara to be this comfortable in the duo.
I got to talk about Jengaru here a little bit out of this jungle lane because again, we came in here learning that this man was coming in here with a controller to play here and popped off 7-0 with Serket out of the jungle. Not one of the easiest gods to play on that peripheral exactly.
Okay, I mean, to speak to your point, when I was playing on console, J-Mac, my team said, hey, Mifflin, could you please play Serket? And my hands like crumbled into dust as I attempted to make something work for my squad. It never did. I started playing a Wheelish instead. So credit to Jengaru for doing what I could not. That man, very impressive on the sticks.
A strong performance out of Samsara here in game number 1. But there is still some hope for Thunderhead because there's another game that they got to play. It's a best of 3 all weekend long, at least up until we get to those exact qualifier matches at the very end of the week. But Thunderhead are going to have to get a big wind under their sails here to kind of bring them back because it was definitely a struggle in game 1. We'll see if they can bring it back in game number 2.
Friendship team wins game number 1 in a very convincing fashion. Samsara off to a great start here in the Season 9 SPL play-in tournament. Some back-and-forth action early on in this game, but a steamroll later on. And this is no surprise, I don't think, because the way that some of these North American SOC and SEC teams play is just in your face, knockdown, drag-out style of play. And the snowball was just rolling for Samsara by the mid-game.
And I think it's really important because it's by the mid-game, right? Early game, you still have 2 assassins on Thunderhead, and they played that pretty well. They use that to their advantage. They get a couple of kills early on, and they look pretty solid because of it. But then time maybe goes on a little too long for them. Unfortunately, they had Privative and Jangaro to deal with on the other side. Jangaro starts getting active super early on this circuit and finding early ganks, really controlling the duo lane, helping find a lot of damage. But you also get some really, really amazing taunts and setup coming from Privative. And I think the two in tandem, roaming the map, really cause a lot. I think it's actually this gank on solo was one of the ones that really started the forefront. I mean, look, it's a 12.0 KDA. You've got this guy all over the map. It's impossible to handle what this Circuit was able to do, and you cannot let them do that if you want to be able to win this set. So I do expect some control in the jungle going forward for Thunderhead, but realistically, it wasn't just the Circuit. The Circuit had an absolutely knockout game, but you've got this great setup from Privative, who's doing great terms, body blocks, taunts, things like that, and that allows things like this Thoth to look incredible on top of that as well, and just really open the door for this team to swing for the fences.
Gore, these two highlights, the one that we previously saw from Briz to that last one, was like 3 or 4 minutes apart in game time, and 10,000 gold difference between the two highlights. That purple buff play, the game was 1 kill in favor of Samsara, and the gold was dead even.
Yeah.
And then like 4 minutes later in that game, we're at like 8, 9, 10,000 gold ahead. And when you talk about an immediate snowball, in that moment where everything just spiraled out of control, it was Samsara who was able to move forward. And we wondered, purely in picks and ban score, if that was going to be the style of game we saw because of the setup from the solo lane and the damage from the Cerberus, the Circuit, the ability to set up there, the Athena, the ability to set up and do damage there, right? And then can you protect the Thoth? And the Thoth was protected all game long.
Copiously. He was covered.
And so I think, Gore, we saw some good moments from the jungle of this Thunderhead team early on there in that game as well. Gonna need to see more of that. Maybe that's the style of game where you're best of 3, we go back to the drawing board on some picks and bans, we realize that we've got our place in this set as well.
I thought of something mean, but I don't want to say it because it'll make you sad.
It'll make me sad?
Yeah, it'll make specifically you sad. I don't want to do that.
Why? Because you just said
no,
that?
No, because I was gonna say that's what you wish the Bengals O-line looked like.
No, here's all right.
Protected. Look at how much protection he had.
That's right.
He was perfectly happy back there.
Yeah, right. So how safe?
And I'm talking about Briz.
How safe Briz was in that game was the opposite.
Exactly. That's what you wish you could have seen.
Right, and then Samsara had Aaron Donald and Von Miller rushing down the back line of Thunderhead that game and absolutely destroying him. And so maybe, now we're in the off season, right? We're in the free agency period. If we're Thunderhead, let's pick up a free agent offensive lineman maybe. Let's add a new player to our team to keep our back line nice and safe.
And that's what's weird, because they had, theoretically, some really good divers on their composition. The problem is I think there was just too much disjointment in a lot of their engagements. And the best example, and this is something like, just to quote Mifflin, was that Czechio got respect when he was under Phoenix, when he was somewhere where it could really provide a lot, and that was about where that ended. Never in the jungle did they care. They made sure to shut down that soul, so it didn't matter if you had this Camazotz, this Artio, this Fenrir that could create space, get to the backline, cause some trouble back there, because you didn't have any follow-up damage. There was nobody there to make sure that mattered, that got kills for your team. Yep. And so realistically, I think Thunderhead, it's not just maybe a switch up here in the gods to make sure they have a stronger front line. I do think that they need to change up how they protect Czechio.
A beautiful drafting from Samsara in Game 1. More of the same in Game 2. We'll see them moving on to play the Oni Homies. I'm 1 for 1, Gore, on Oni Homies versus Oni Warriors.
And I'm going to try to keep it that way.
We're going to keep it that way. We're 1 for 1 there. So now Thunderhead find themselves in that first pick. So we had some fun in Game 1. Let's hope we get a little bit more of that here in Game number 2. Similar bans, but an immediate respect ban to Privative. The Athena being taken away by Thunderhead. So we don't want that as first pick. We don't want Privative to get it later on in this draft either. And I wonder, you know, and we talk about the meta shifting and kind of learning things early on here this weekend. It's picks like that, where of course these teams have been scrimming and prepping, but it's picks like that where, you know, maybe we give a shot. Let's see if Athena works in game 1, and then suddenly every team sees Athena and it looks amazing, and then like all weekend long it just starts to get banned out. And so a lot of moving and shaking will be done priority-wise in these first couple of sets, but still some figuring out to be done. Amaterasu banned out as well, so that won't change. And then Kleena, Goro, we've seen a couple of Kleena bans early on here in this weekend.
And I do think it's a carryover. It was actually really weird. I remember talking about it because after Worlds, I think it was day 1, I remember sitting back and thinking, there wasn't any Kleena today. And then that stayed true for the rest of the weekend. It was just very bizarre because she'd been very prominent during the Worlds qualifiers there at the end of December and things like that. So it is that question of how much power she can bring. And realistically, I think she can be a huge threat in the right hands. And I think Samsara are just trying to make sure that to respect that. I think big note that I have coming out of this is that, you know, they still go for this Amaterasu ban. Bastet is suddenly available. Like it's the one that, you know, you're harping on. I'm wondering, and specifically because it's Snatty, I would be worried about pretty much anything over there. And that's something else to mention from last game was that it took a little bit of time before Snatty picked up.
Yep.
But then once Snatty joined the fight, guess what? Snatty had a great positive KDA.
And Thunderhead, Gore, and you look at solo lane specifically, this RDO was shut down in game number 1. It was early jungle pressure from Jangaru on the right side of the map. And you're right, it took Snatty some time to rotate into those fights. But when Wengu was finally rotating into fights, it felt like the RDO was a little bit behind just because of the way that laning phase had gone. Thunderhead realizing that it was maybe more the way that early and mid game went and not so much the RDO pick in general. And so we will return to an RDO pick early on here for Thunderhead. Morgan Le Fay, though, Gore, with 0 mid lane bans. Morgan Le Fay standing on top of the priority list for Samsara.
Morgan Le Fay can do some good damage. And Morgan Le Fay, as Mifflin would put it, has an unreactionable CC that you can throw out there. But I also think that she's just in a really comfortable spot with what she can provide for your team. Good damage, good control. You're probably not going to be able to get away with the thought they recognize that they don't have the Athena this time, so like setup isn't going to come as easily to the team. Granted, that's not to say that it's not going to be something they'll be able to find. I'm excited to see what this is going to be able to provide because we've seen a lot of Morgan Le Fay games where she has been absolutely nuts. But there were also a lot of games last year when she got nerfed after a little bit, and then all of a sudden it was like, okay, well, she's like your 4th string, maybe your 5th string mid laner that you're going to pull out. You're still going to your Tiamats, who we've not seen at all today, as well as some of the other mid laners that used to kind of run the meta. I think the items right now also really heavily benefit her early game and could really open up some conversations, especially if she's paired with a Surcat jungle after what we just saw.
And that's where she's needed a little bit of help in that early game, and Morgan Le Fay maybe itemization-wise in a better spot. We do finally see a mid lane ban, Gore, but it's Persephone that's getting taken away. And so in all of the variety that we've seen in the mid lane, we've seen a Thoth already, right? A Morgan Le Fay, now a Persephone gets banned out. And so mid lane, as important of a role as it is, seeing some unique picks and bans.
Yeah.
And Thunderhead, Gore, you know, you look at their draft from game 1, one of the concerns was setup and CC. And, you know, you have great dive, but elsewhere in the fight, do you have the lockdown to really set up for these fights better? The answer ended up being no. I think Thunderhead have already addressed that here in their picks and bans for game 2.
Yeah, much better CC. Plus, and this is something, I just love Sylvanas, and this is regardless of meta, I
want to put you on the spot, so
go for it, and we'll see what happens with it.
I enjoy your Sylvanas impression, Gore.
Okay. Oh, I thought you were going to say something and it was going to be like some really obscure thing and like Sylvanas' kit, and I was going to be like, all right, dude, hold on, let me Google.
Potentially as embarrassing as your Sylvanas impression.
Sylvanas.
And spot on.
Yeah.
That was him getting locked in, by the way. That wasn't even Goremizer. That was the voice of him getting locked in. That was fantastic from Gore. Let's catch back up, though.
I had to, like, steel myself for a second.
You had to take a deep breath. Look, we're getting back into the swing of things.
You can't do an old man with, like, a big smile on your face.
No, you absolutely can. That's how happy we are to be back here with some competitive Smite for Season 9. Odin and Horus. And you want to talk about team fight and lockdown, Gore. You got plenty of that for Samsara here. Horus, admittedly, a bit surprising. We'd heard rumbles of maybe some Horus here this week. We're getting it in game 2.
And I honestly really like Horus. I think yesterday me and J-Mac were talking about Horus with like Runeforged and what like kind of shenanigans you can do with things like that. But like just like you remove items, remove some of the other stuff, which is wild to say in a MOBA, and I don't know why I'm starting with that as a premise. But realistically, in his base kit, you've got good healing, you've got a really fun ult if used properly, and you've got one of my favorite like CC abilities, even though it's really short, even though it can be difficult in the middle of the fray to actually hit the guy that you want. You've got a prot shred and a stun that all comes together, plus a really hefty knock-up, even though it's centralized around you. I just think he's fun. Early on, it's real rough. It's rough times for Horus because you can just get bodied and bullied really hard. But once you do get some of those items online, I really like what he brings to the table. The downside is that this is a very heavy physical comp so far from Samsara.
Wow. Okay, so Thunderhead Gore throwing some unique picks at the end of their draft here. ESET, and the last time we saw some of these SOC, SCC teams and these players specifically, feels like ESET was support in all the games that we were seeing ESET. That's not going to be the case
We got a Nox support to counter.
Yeah, how fun is that?
That's burned into my memory.
As it should be, in a bad way. ESET picked here for Thunderhead.
And that team won Worlds. Hold on.
Outside of pure chaos, ESET will be in the mid lane here. Ho Yi for ADC. And so both carries locked in last for Thunderhead. Let's start with ESET here and realistic expectations.
Okay.
If CC is your concern, Spirit Ball and the silence that ESET has, great instances of some CC and some setup for your team. And then there's some big damage on top of it as well, circle protection.
Each of those can be used for self-peel too, right? Like if the Serket's jumping on you, you can silence her, you can stun her and try to get away. The problem is that Serket is super mobile, and Serket's going to sit on you no matter what. You can silence her, and it's like, cool, you stopped her dash, and now she's going to leap at you. No matter what, I think someone's going to still be able to close that gap. So this is going to be a really high execution threshold in my mind for this ESET to look good. She does a lot of damage in the right hands. I mean, Spirit Ball does like 1.5x at max range, so you can hit really hard. You had mentioned Circle of Protection, but that's great for objectives. I think when it comes to team fights and control and healing, Thunderhead have so much in their favor. When it comes to mobility and trying to escape the guys that are going to kill your carries, ESET's going to need a little bit of help. Who Yi should be fine.
Gore, could we see like 10 sets of beats? I think everyone in this game, every single character,
you might want it,
has some style of CC like right off the bat. Every single lane is going to be under some type of pressure from minute 1 until the end of this game.
Now here's what I'm thinking.
Okay.
And this is only because
I always want to hear what you're thinking.
I have not bought this yet, but it was a shift in relics because Phantom Veil doesn't exist.
Right.
But Phantom Shell exists.
That's right.
And I'm wondering if that's going to be a pickup in this game because of dealing with the Odin. It's something because like you get the shield, it feels pretty decent overall. I think you still get the basic attack reduction, the 50% on top of that. It's just now you can walk through walls on top of that, and so it's going to be something that could be very fun. But based on relics we've seen, it's kind of this toss-up for whether or not Thunderhead won it.
That's a good point. To be clear, no more Phantom as a relic, but if you upgrade Shell enough in the right tree, it'll allow you to walk through those Odin walls. Erlang Shen, I always jokingly call Earlyon Shen, mid lane sometimes under some pressure here if you're Morgan Le Fay. Thunderhead might be able to find some pressure early on in the mid lane. They need to bounce back in game 2. Let's go.
It's going to be a big one, and what an arsenal of gods that we get thrown at us here for game number 2. We get Sylvanas making his way back in. ESET not in support role this time around, instead going towards the mid lane. And Ho Yi, a god who, at least in the SPL, has had some less than good success, I think is the best way to put that one. But over on the other side, we also get things like Horus and Morgan Le Fay. And I think talking maybe about Snatty here with this Odin and kind of talking about the potential of Shell now going into that Phantom Shell being a huge change here.
Yeah, beforehand, you're picking up Phantom almost feels like a concession. Like, okay, I guess his walls are good enough. I have to get this relic just to deal with that. But now that the Phantom effect has been applied to Shell, you're already building Shell for the most part anyway this season. So I feel like Odin probably indirectly takes a bit of a nerf with that change towards the relics. But I got to be completely candid with you, J-Mac. When I was watching the draft phase, I saw Samsara's top 3. I looked over, saw Thunderhead's top 3. I said, GG. I mean, I was like, no way they're able to stack up against the pressure that Samsara is bringing. But having seen these drafts completed, I really like how Thunderhead's team composition is going to work holistically once they group up. But where did they struggle in game 1? It was getting to that point. It was a lot of lane diff, so they got to clean that up to get there.
We want to talk about the potential of lane diff. We already see it once again. Lots of pressure out of Samsara's dual lane. They're able to put Czechio and Dark Wizard already back at their tier 1 tower, and they get a very early beads out of the Hunter. Czechio will have those on cooldown. Nice little pull by Dark Wizard, and the dash from Privative just a little shy from hitting that tree. So Dark Wizard will be just fine, but Czechio is eating some good poke out of Shinigami. They'll be able to go over and get that new Heartbeat camp that's there. One of those things that we didn't really touch on last time is, yes, the Draugr camp is gone. No longer will that be there. Instead, it is a couple of Harpies there to go for some farm and some experience. Axe off the mark, but not the stun. Primitive gets some good damage onto Czechio and forces that leap out of the Hunter. He'll be put down to a quarter HP.
That's going to cost you the shell from Dark Wizard. Beads down on both Hunters, so keep your eyes on the junglers. Jengaru hovering nearby, might look to get involved, but as is the Ray Shadow, could be a brawl in the duo.
Ray Shadow is the one here first, despite Jengaru being the earliest to the rotation. Ray Shadow just needs a good pin, just needs some good setup, but he misses the pin. The stun is good. The knockup from Ray Shadow is decent too, but now Jengaru is back here, but he separates his targets, and Dark Wizard is the one who gets left out to dry. It's Shinigami who picks up first blood.
Yeah, surprised to see Ray Shadow elect to pick up Beads so early on. Maybe concerned about all the CC output. Beads does save his life, but maybe costs him that early kill towards Privative, who had dashed in aggressively, not realizing that the jungler was so nearby. Samsara on the knife's edge finds himself in a first blood position, comfortably ahead.
Oh, we saw this all last game. We're seeing it once again.
Czechio?
Czechio is trying to face tank the damage of Shinigami, but that is not the best idea to try and box up against an Uller early game. And Mark will get collapsed on at his own red buff. Not a chance in the world he's making it out of there. Briz comes up and gets a second kill for Samsara with the help of his jungler and his support. And they'll steal away the red buff from Thunderhead.
It's twice now that Samsara has put so much emphasis on the dual lane throughout the early, and we have not seen a proper response from Thunderhead. Red buff, purple, both controlled now by the Chaos team, and plenty of experience on their side of the map to fall back towards and pick up. Gotta expect Ray Shadow to try and rotate back over towards the dual lane, trying to get that redemption arc. Shinigami, sure. Bluestone Ul, not super fun to play against. Lots of poke, lots of burst potential, especially considering he's got that kill for himself, so Transcendent's going to be finished up very shortly. But somebody's got to slow him down. This was the pressure point for Thunderhead in Game 1. Samsara's dual lane was allowed to roam free for much too long, and now controlling the neutral farm, the enemy farm, their own farm. We're looking at a second verse, same as the first situation.
One massive relic change that has kind of swapped up here from Game 1 to Game 2 has been a Bracer out of Privative. We'll see if that even gets put to use right now. Dash is just off the mark, so Czechio will be fine. But it is a Bracer picked up by Privative, something that we saw kind of rise at the very start of Phase 3 last season, and then kind of taper off just a little bit. We didn't really see it all that much more, but now it's gotten a buff in its third tier of it at least. You get like 20% extra power or movement speed, depending on what your health is at when you go through. But right now, it starts out at what it was when it was fully maxed out last time around at that 15%.
Yeah, I'm a massive fan of Bracer, just full stop. I think that having a Sentry Ward built into your Relic slot feels very good. The ability to just buff your team consistently as well. You're not sacrificing too much in that secondary Relic. So that's why I was kind of surprised that that item kind of fell off the face of the planet for a little while here. But now in Season 9, got a little bit of a resurgence. 2 options going forward that are both going to be incredibly strong. It's also going to save you a lot of money throughout the game. I think that's one aspect of this Relic that a lot of people aren't accounting for, is just you're not spending 120 gold every time you want a Sentry. That's going to start slowly adding up. I'm keeping my eyes on them, see when Privative decides to upgrade that.
Red buff started by Thunderhead. Samsara a little bit late on the rotation to try and steal that one away, but they are definitely fishing for anything that they can grab here. Thunderhead, though, do have the advantage as far as the obelisks are concerned when those ones spawned in. You can already see about 4 or 5 stacks that they've been able to put up on their obelisk.
Are you sure?
Well, it was about 4 or 5 stacks. Primitive will come over and try and slow that one down. And thankfully for Thunderhead, their team was there to pick up the one flower that he had dropped on the ground. So yeah, it'll still remain about that 4 or 5 stacks.
Yeah, but Horus is a very good god at playing that aggressive steal your flower style, right? Like, he's just going to hover nearby, stand in there. If he gets into the risk, he's got the global ultimate to escape, or he could utilize the global ultimate to re-engage onto the obelisk itself. I mean, look at him. He doesn't have to show respect. Privative groups up on the obelisk yet again. He's snagging your flowers, and he's already involved in the fight.
He's going to use the ultimate. Czechio used this leap very early. The land is right on place. Right on target.
Good knockup.
The stun is now good because the beads were expended to get away from the knockup earlier. Czechio is holding out for as long as he can, but that's not much longer. Shinigami able to get the kill, and a little bit of help with that bracer dropped in the middle of the tower during that fight too.
Man, Privative is putting on a show today. I mean, the Athena was magnificent in lane, the control he brought, and now the Horus as well getting involved.
Briz under fire himself though. 3 surrounding the mid laner. Ultimate is already gone, and the CC is not going to matter to Mark. He'll be able to close out that kill and finally put Thunderhead on the board here in game 2.
And Wengu at least is allowed to play his lane this time around instead of getting 3-man dove consistently. But
are you really playing the game if you're playing Artio, though?
it looks like he's having a lot of fun. I don't know, man. He's sitting on the tower line, healing up, dealing some damage. But Thunderhead finally finding a response on the map, able to strip away some of those flowers and put some pressure onto Samsara's jungle. Just like game 1, 6 minutes in, the gold still relatively even, experience relatively even across the board as well. Samsara have got themselves a kill lead, but have got only that, just the kill lead.
Thunderhead finally get an obelisk of their own. They finally get the Indra Scepter for their team, but maybe they want more than just the Scepter. They will want this Gold Fury, but just with Privative walking over, that is more than enough pressure for Thunderhead to walk away and think twice about going for this objective, even though they do have the Set, who is one of the better gods to secure these objectives.
We got to speak objectively, man. She's the best. She's the best at securing objectives. There's no way anyone's better. The damage output at this portion of the game, the damage mitigation for your own team, the healing, nobody wants to fight into that, especially at the 7-minute mark.
Well, Privative will slowly eat a little bit of damage from Dark Wizard. Wizard will get the pull up against Privative. He doesn't have an ally near him just yet. Jangaru is here. Lots of damage popped through to this support, but fortunate for a Horus, he does have that dash to allies. And with Jangaru nearby, he's able to get on out. And 7 minutes in, a fairly even game, very slight lead here for Thunderhead thanks to some of those turnaround kills and especially getting that obelisk up. They're at least able to maintain a state of evenness here early on.
What I'm looking at Shinigami's build. That can't be standard on Uller, is it? I didn't get a lot of chance to play in the last couple of weeks. COVID knocked me out, but dominance early on, giving your basic attacks additional penetration, that's nice. But Ull's kind of an ability-based god in my mind. It doesn't synergize very well with the Bluestone. And Thunderhead, well, they just walk over to the Gold Fury using that superior secure.
And not just that, they also use the Suns. They'll jump in on Shinigami, who uses the beads to get away from one stun. Mark is under fire, but a huge ultimate from Dark Wizard holds 2 of them back. Now Shinigami gets turned right back on. He doesn't have his lead. He doesn't have his beads. He doesn't have anywhere to go. It's Czechio to finally put him in the dirt. But Jangaru gets 1, makes it a 2. Jangaru able to leap away for the time being. And Snatty with his rotation over, with that teleport, able to turn this fight back around. He'll grab Ray Shadow alongside Briz.
And Czechio, he's not out of the pan just yet. Briz might be able to catch him out. If he rotates in towards this wave, could expose himself here. But Samsara, they may not have gotten the objective, but they win out on the team fight afterward. At the end of the day, once the dust settles, that does put Thunderhead ahead in gold, but just gold. Experience still exactly even across the board. Massive win, though, for Thunderhead. I gotta say, utilizing that early pressure on the E set, utilizing that circle protection to create these scenarios to generate threat on the neutral objective is going to force Samsara to put respect elsewhere on the map. They got to worry now about the Fire Giant, the ability to do that, the Pyromancer as well, now under threat.
All right, well, Wengu, your free trial of the early game is over, and now it's time to fight, and never mind, there's a stun, and he's completely fine. All right, you can continue your trial. Maybe, hold on that thought. Jangaru goes back in, Privative there with the knockup, but it's level 7 and level 8 versus a level 11 Artio with that Jade Emperor's crown. Yeah, there's no chance they're killing her.
No, very difficult to shut down Artio, regardless of build. Just having additional CC, having the ability to heal yourself, all these roots, as well as the dash up against Samsara, who had already utilized the Odin ultimate, so Snatty doesn't have the lockdown. Jangaru's ultimate just now coming back up, means that he wasn't able to utilize that either. Wengu just able to work his way throughout the entire of these team fights. I'm expecting this Artio to start making some pretty massive rotations over towards mid. Got great lockdown ability against gods like Morgan Le Fay. It's time to start utilizing it.
Czechio, he definitely wants to get some fighting going this time now that he has the advantage. He leaps in and uses the Suns to put Shinigami back. And
That's
now
free.
sets up for some aggression for his team to go for this Pyromancer. Nobody from Samsara within range to take this one away. And first neutral objective, or second neutral objective of the game. It was 15 minutes last time before we saw one go down. Now we've seen 2 in barely 10 minutes of play, and both of them go to Thunderhead.
Yeah, I was just bringing up earlier how Thunderhead had already shown that they've got the ability to shut down these objectives so quickly. I was expecting Samsara to show up on time, but they were only about 5-6 seconds behind, and 5 or 6 seconds against this draft that Thunderhead have got is going to net them an objective. The auto attack damage of Ray's Shadow, the damage output of this New Age Mage build from its mark, all just going to add up.
Jengar and Primitive go in deep to try and get a kill against Ray Shadow, but now a Dark Wizard here. It's going to spell the end of that, but the pull off the mark by the support, so that fight will cease to exist any longer. But now the Obelisks are back up and active, which means that these camps are back up for grabs, and Shinigami only needs one basic to steal away that camp and get the first Lotus on the board for his team. We'll go over towards these little side camps too, and we can see that that's where one more of those flowers was active there, and on those Alpha Harpies over in the solo lane.
Yeah, I'm enthralled by Shinigami's build so far. I mean, it's very standard. He's got a high addition of penetration early on. It still goes towards that standard Atalanta's in the second slot, so he's got some crit chance available, some attack speed. I'm very curious to see where he goes.
That was 600 of Brizz's health taken out in just an instant there. He's going to get a little bit of it back thanks to the ultimate. And under the tier 1 tower he goes, not willing to continue any further in towards that fight as Thunderhead. But a double taunt and a double ultimate there out of Dark Wizard and his jungler. Keep them out for now. But a cage is dropped by Snatty to hold them in. Czechio managed to pick up a solo kill all the while up against Shinigami. And Thunderhead can go for a retreat now that they know their Hunter's got that secured kill. And the rest of them are out.
Man, Czechio playing with a vengeance. That was a solo kill between Shinigami's towers, by the way. He was playing that aggressively elsewhere on the map, and you're allowed to take that style of play when you realize that the entirety of Samsara is locked down on the right-hand side of the map. It's impossible for anyone to make a rotation to help out Shinigami. So, rightfully so, Czechio utilizing that opportunity, now forcing Shinigami back to base, slowing down his build even further, and a build that is going so heavily towards crit is something you want to get online very quickly. Tier 1 Shuriken, not a great stat stick. Tier 2 Shuriken, pretty bad as well. If you're going for a crit build, it's all about the Tier 3 items or Tier 4, but we haven't got an opportunity to talk about those just yet. Whereas Thunderhead's ADC Czechio has gone for a very standard build. It's Crusher, it's Aussie, it's Balanced Blade. He's going to be shredding objectives, and he's going to take every 1v1 from here on out.
Czechio, we get a nice little replay there. A gross bounce off the wall to stop the back. And the 1v1 just goes handedly here to Czechio, even a kill with the Suns under the tower. But kind of speaking about Tier 4 items, we didn't get to see any last time because the game went so fast, and maybe we'll have to hold off on talking about them for now. Oni Fury is here. Ultimate down from the mid laner to try and hold this one back. It's an early ult in by Primitive. Thunderhead get the Fury and to get the kill on the support. Jengaru goes in to try and get some damage back, but there is nothing to help him out. He gets bursted down alongside his mid laner, and it's a 3-for-1 trade as Snatty is able to pick up the support.
And Shinigami wants to turn it into even more. He's doing a good deal of damage as Snatty forced to use that ultimate defensively. Is it time to fall back? Ray's Shadow, I don't think you win these.
Not quite. He does get a little bit of help from Wengu to hold him back here, but now that the dust has settled on the fight for the time being, unless Snatty can find a cheeky pick here. Let's talk about this Tier 4 item that Snatty's picked up in that Breastplate of Determination, giving him some extra procs whenever he eats some ability damage. And then once he gets that fully stacked up, he gets a nice little burst of movement speed too.
I have been playing jungle for 9, 10 years. Breastplate of Determination almost single-handedly made me switch my role. That's how strong this item is. When you have got full use of the passive, it's 40 protections both ways, additional movement speed. You've already got the base stats of Breastplate on it. I think it's 65 prots, 20% CDR. That item is crazy how strong it is, the power spike at this point in the game. I think that at this point, Snatty can do just about no wrong. My man can walk all the way to Isengard for all I care, man. He could go anywhere on the map, and you're going to struggle mightily to shut him down. And that's true of Odin on his own just because of the nature of having a health shield as well as the ability to spawn up a cage. Now having to deal with additional movement speed and all those prots, I think Snatty's going to be creating a lot of space in these fights.
And it's an item that's becoming real popular with the solo laners. We've even seen some cases of supports throughout the early stages of this season, kind of in ranked play, casual play. I've been seeing a lot of supports even maybe look towards this item if they want to get some extra CDR in their build, because wouldn't go wrong for a support to get some extra CDR, get your abilities, your CC up a little bit sooner, and all those prots are going to be necessary.
Oh my God.
He just gets chunked out by the Spirit Ball. There's not many places he can go. The ultimate, not quite enough, but it's Mark here. We'll be able to take him down thanks to the Wing Guts. Does Primitive even have the speed to get out of here? Yes, he does. just tanky enough to make it out.
Mark is dealing too much damage right now.
He's
600 damage from a Spear Ball, each tick a Wing Gust, doing upwards of 250 as well. This E-set needs to be addressed in the team fight. It's got to be Snatty. If Snatty's not around, Samsara can't fight around its Mark.
I think everybody forgot how much damage ESET can
I
do
did.
because for the last half of the year, we've been seeing her in support role over everything else. Now that we're seeing her in mid, we get to truly see what this god can do.
Yeah, the 408 has really skewed everybody's vision. Wangu maybe skewed his vision as well, stepping up a little bit aggressively, but never mind, Mark's here, and he erases.
Yeah, no, Spirit Ball will take him down. Briz uses the Aegis and the beads quickly, but he's going to need a second set of them to try and get out of here. Ray Shadow's the
Still
one
alive?
who closes it out. Snatty, even with all those protections, it is not enough to save his life. Czechio picks him up for a nice three-piece combo for Thunderhead.
Yeah, its Mark is just a menace on the map. 2, 2, and 8 for the mid laner right now, but the damage output is just ridiculous. Worth noting that Briz on the other side is putting out similar numbers, but it is not having similar impact. Both sitting at 9,100, but only one team grouped up on the Fire Giant, and only one team has still got the best confirmation in the game available. This Fire, it's a foregone conclusion.
It is a free Fire Giant here for Thunderhead. And talk about a complete 180 of a game that we've had from game 1 here into game number 2. Last time around, it was Shinigami solo killing Czechio every opportunity he got. Snatty using teleport to go to that left side of the map every opportunity that he got. And now it's Shinigami getting soloed by Czechio earlier on. Now it's Wangu making these faster rotations, these more impactful ones out of that solo lane. And Mark, completely different game than we saw in game number 1. Now those Wing Gusts hitting upwards close to 300 damage a tick. Yeah, that is some pain to deal with.
Yeah, in game 1, I think the only time I said it's Mark's name was when I was calling out his deaths, right? I mean, he was not having a high impact match. The opposite is true this time around. My man is the game. I mean, there was a Harpy there at one point, or at least so I'm told. Production in my ear has informed me that yes, there was a Harpy, but no longer. Same could be said of the Tier 1 tower, Tier 2 as well. Samsara, they don't love their odds in the defense, so instead, they're trying to split the map and at least get some global gold for their squad. But they're going to have to back very shortly because that Tier 2 has already been removed, and they're on the Phoenix. Thunderhead pushing in.
Yeah, not a base race that you want to take here, though. Ultimate out of Privative. Keep your eyes on where that one may land in. It's going to be
50%.
right in the middle of all of them, and that will slow down the Phoenix. But Shinigami gets stopped right in his tracks. Once again, Mark, with this Spirit Ball on point, really showing the damage output that this E-set has.
Yeah, mages are not allowed to complain ever again. I don't want to hear it from anybody. These guys are dealing so much damage at this portion of the game. Phoenix on 50%. Thunderhead, they can play it slow. They still have 2.5 minutes with this Fire Giant. Just poke out the Phoenix.
Pull off the mark by Mark, but Privative does not matter. Dark Wizard will be able to get the kill there. A cage comes down from Snatty, but that's really just to get his team out of danger more than anything else. The shell does get popped, that Phantom Shell, just to make sure they can continue that push on the left side. Phoenix goes down, and Thunderhead in complete control here in game number 2 will make their way towards the mid lane tower to strip that one off the map.
Man, what an incredibly quick pace of the last 8 or so minutes of this game. Thunderhead have completely opened the doors of Samsara, and they've pushed this gold lead exponentially, approaching the 10,000 mark 19 minutes in. And do my eyes see me? Yeah, they do. For a second there, I thought Privative was down at the Gold Fury. He was going to get collapsed on. Instead, it's just the Gold Fury. And Thunderhead going to pick up yet another objective for free. We have seen next to zero opposition from Samsara around these neutrals. To be fair, you don't really want them at this Gold Fury, but a little bit earlier on may have gone a long way.
To be fair, we did see one attempt at a stop at a Gold Fury earlier, and as soon as Privative landed, he was dead. And then 2 of his other teammates died right after that one. So not the most fun thing to try and do is fight into this team at those objectives. Wangu will have his blue buff stolen away by Shinigami, but Wangu won't take that lightly. He'll charge forward. And now the rest of Thunderhead have gone back to base. They've had some time to buy their items and start regrouping. We can see that it is an upgraded Bracer out of Dark Wizard for his second relic picked up here. But I think the more interesting thing is that Mark picked up a Phantom Shell of his own.
Hey, if Mark's the only one who's going to be the target of Snatty in these team fights, might as well be able to peel out for yourself. ESET, essentially a sitting duck if Odin is able to drop the Ring of Spear, is no longer the case because Mark now has additional HP built into his kit because Shell just does that. And he's also got the secondary properties of a Phantom, so he can walk through walls. Thunderhead going to feel very confident in their ability to take the next couple of team fights. I think Samsara, on the other hand, had to play very smart, very defensive. But it's worth noting that experience across the board is largely equalized. I think the largest level deficit is 1, and that's for supports and jungle. That's not a lot. Gold, on the other hand, tells a little bit of a different story. And at this portion of the game, gold's still incredibly important. But Samsara are still able to fight their way back in. Thunderhead have still got to keep their head above water.
And you see the largest gap that we have is basically 1 full item between the solo laners, and then half items kind of back and forth between the other players across the board here. Although there is an upgraded starter item out of Czechio that Death's Temper picked up. That way he can get a lot of extra damage whenever he starts shredding through some of those. And Privative, going with one of the new Ankh upgrades here, I believe that's the Blighted Ankh he picked up, which will take any of the healing that was dealt throughout the duration of it, and they'll take a percentage of that away from them and give it towards his team instead, which is a little interesting because I've been seeing a lot more of the Drowned Ankh, which is where you drop that miasma pool and you kind of get that extra little damage out there. So interesting to see the Blighted.
Yeah, still worth noting that it still has that OG Ankh effect where if you do take healing while you're affected by this relic, you also take additional damage from all sources. I believe it's 25% from this Ankh that Privative has picked up. On the other side, Mark picks up the Wild Beads, essentially, that does additional damage if you're able to cleanse some CC to whoever applies it to you. So that said, Ismark is now an incredibly tanky, incredibly damaging. You don't want to CC him. He's also giving his entire team healing and damage mitigation. I don't know. Maybe shut down Mark a little bit earlier, but it's going to be pretty difficult for anyone on Samsara to close gap, especially now considering Snatty's ultimate not going to do a whole lot on first rotation.
I mean, with the damage that Mark is outputting, I don't know if anybody from Samsara wants to jump in to try and stop him. It feels like really only Snatty is going to get any kind of benefit from doing so there, and we've seen what's happened to him even so. But the Fire Giant started up one more time by Thunderhead, and they don't even need the ESET ultimate until just now, just as the securing blow to take that one down. Primitive goes in with the ultimate, but he's all by himself in the middle of 5, and that's not where you want to be up against Thunderhead. He gets blown up instantly, and the shell gets popped just to get themselves in, out, and back inside the cage at the very least. But Thunderhead get the Fire Giant, and they get 1.
Yeah, they got Dark Wizard's shell, by the way, so Mark can still peel for himself pretty easily as Ray's Shadow is able to connect the pin, and he's taking no damage.
He does not care about anything that Briz is doing here. The beads, the ages, they're not enough. Czechio picks up 1 kill. That's now 2 down for Samsara, and 15 until 1 comes back up. Snatty, all those protections are going to need to come in even better for you here if you want to get out of that one. That left side Phoenix is down. Thunderhead will at least go for the right side before they look towards the Titan that's already got fire minions pushing into the throne room. And the Titan under fire now. But keep your eyes up. Privative is back up. He'll go in. Big bird bomb, but the ESET ultimate is up. And that might as well secure game number 1. Thunderhead turn this one around and tie up the set.
Man, Thunderhead just plays so masterfully around their objective-focused composition. Once ESET grouped up on that first Gold Fury, Thunderhead never slowed down. It was Gold Fury, 2 minutes later, Pyromancer. 3 minutes later, back to the Gold Fury. Fire Giant at, 17 minutes into the game as well. Samsara just were not quick enough on the uptake to deal with this high-paced, objective style that we saw from Thunderhead.
I mean, this new double flat pen meta out of these mid laners has kind of brought
I didn't realize it was that crazy.
Yeah,
I didn't know.
It's just that good, but it's also kind of brought something we haven't seen in a while, which is objective securing gods. Before, it was a lot of the hunters, kind of the mage hunters. These ones don't really do a whole lot of instant damage to those objectives. Now we're seeing what Thoths and E-sets and things like that can do up against these objectives. It's called melt them and kill them instantly, and that's what we see here in game 2.
Yeah, and you don't even have to say objectives. It could be gods, it could be like camps. It doesn't really matter. This double penetration build throughout the early is just your go button. You finish Spear of Deso, you start fighting, and that's the truth of it. But that's not to take away from Magical Hunters, J-Mac. With Nimble Rod now in the game, I think that Magical Hunters have only gotten better. I think we will see them throughout this weekend, but likely in the long lane instead of mid.
Well, we'll see what happens here in game number 3, excuse me. So we get ready to take it to a break, and then we'll get started to see who's going to close out our first set of the day.
and set into the play-ins weekend. We've already got a Game 3. No knockouts happening in this next one, but remember how important it is to stay on that upper side of the bracket. Give yourself a little leeway. Avoid going down to the loser side of the bracket here this weekend. And so the Game 3 we have before us already, one set into this weekend, so important in giving Samsara or Thunderhead the ability to move forward in a slightly more comfortable manner. You go against the Oni homies in your next matchup. But for now, you're happy with the way things have gone. And the reason we get a Game 3 Gore is because Thunderhead bounced back, and they bounced back in a big way.
Yeah.
The way we can kind of word it to really simplify it, if you watched Game 1 and you missed Game 2, reverse what you saw happen. Thunderhead snowballed this game out of control, and Samsara was swept by the side.
Yeah, I think this one, it was insane to watch. First off, Czechio looked night and day compared to that Seoul game. Seoul, in game number 1, was just getting sit on, got soloed a couple of times, was not able to really get running the way that you would have wanted out of that pick. But Sugi, on the absolute other side, was just controlling in all regards. But I do think that something really played into this. You'll look at this as a 3.75 KDA here for Mark in the mid lane on this E-set. And you're probably going to notice there's not a whole ton of kills that Mark got this game. Most of that KDA is from the assists, and that's really where the key came through. It was really good objective play coming down from Thunderhead here, but you also got a lot of control in every fight from that E-set. You've got stuns that are coming out left and right from virtually everybody on this team. Some form of CC was going to happen every single engagement. And of course, when you have someone like Czechio playing the way that he did, getting solo kills like this, having a much more successful game in game number 2 than what we got to see in game number 1, it just coalesced into this really, really great team fight. And it looked really great.
It sure did. Thunderhead able to make use. And I love that in moments like this, you see all the instances of single target CC. Czechio's got to hit everything in all these clips, and he's just absolutely inch perfect on all his abilities.
I'm gonna. This is absolutely a break, but when we launched the confetti at Worlds, we were laughing because in the rafters,
is that what just fell down?
That was a piece of confetti that just fell down. I'm gonna keep track of that throughout the entire year
Out of the
because
corner
that
of my
is
eye.
so wild to me. There's so much of it still up there.
I was watching the replays and looking at you, Gore, in the meantime.
I'm just watching this thing fall down.
I saw a tiny little thing out of the corner of my eye, and I wasn't sure, and I see it on the ground. I thought it was like a mark, like a blue tape mark on the ground in front of us when I looked down at it, but no. One of the blue pieces of Leviathan's confetti just fell down from the rafters. We're still celebrating a Leviathan Season 8 SPL win. What team will move one step closer to joining those same Leviathans in the SPL this year? Well, Game 3 is going to have to tell us. And now, Gore, we have seen, I think, some life from Thunderhead, which was so important here in Game 3. Even if Thunderhead loses this Game 3, they drop down to the loser side of the bracket. Avoiding just a crushing 0-2 loss, right? I mean, even if you lose this one 2-1, you've at least shown now that you belong here, and that's what Czechio was saying is, we're just going to play our game. We're the 8th seed. Nobody has us projected to win or even qualify to the SPL. But getting a little momentum going in a set like this is so important. And I'd argue momentum on the side of Thunderhead. You kind of took the wind out of Samsara's sails after a big game, too.
And you get to push forward here and I think we did the math, or I say we. I did the math at one point last year for the SPL because there was that conversation of Game 1s versus Game 2s. And granted, that always comes up in best of 5s, and I can't remember. I know it was like slightly in favor of Game 2s, but realistically it was just, hey, if you win the first 2, you win the set, usually. But for best of 3s, Game 2 was like leagues ahead of how important it was to win that one, mainly because, if you won both of them, then it was just over. So if you win Game 2, then maybe you're going to be able to turn things around. And it's exactly like what you said, right? It's a huge stopper onto Samsara, so it slows them down completely, but then opens up this conversation. You got a good draft, you got a good game, you're in a much better mindset now if you're Thunderhead, and it's just keeping those picks and bans in that play style and level up. Which is the more difficult part here, right? Now that Samsara have seen where they struggled, they can talk about it, and you can see that they've been having those conversations. It is adapting to what we just saw. If Thunderhead tried to pull the same thing out, how do you beat it?
All right, and remember, in moments like this, you're looking at Samsara, and we talked to Privative before Game 1 about how the chemistry that this team shares with one another was going to be important, win or lose. And, you're feeling great after a win. All right, wins out of our sails a little bit. Suffer a tough loss in Game 2. That's where Privative talks about this team, the Samsara's team's ability to take a deep breath, We all jokingly might point fingers at one another, whatever. We're gonna have some fun, and then we'll move on to Game 3. And so I can't imagine that this team is sweating what just happened all that heavily. Before we get into the next round of picks and band score, we now have 2 games of data so far in this current meta, and it feels like we've already seen a decent variety. You know, some repeat picks here and there. The RDO comes to mind, but it feels like the mid lane has seen some variety. The Hunter role has already seen a couple of different picks as well. Feels like things are kind of wide open depending on how these teams want to play their individual games.
Yeah, and I think that really is going to showcase maybe more of what we're going to see this weekend, right? When you go to the SPL, there's a lot of very similar strategy because, you know, most of those guys are very, very adept mechanically and are going to play very similar styles. Good gods, at the end of the day, are going to dictate what your team needs to play. And so you'll end up in this position where you know what to expect out of like the Dragons. You know what to expect out of the Leviathans whenever they're playing. Again, with a lot of these guys, they have kind of free reign to mold themselves still. They haven't necessarily fallen into that, here is your exact style. We just saw that, I think, from Thunderhead being able to go from a composition that was kind of okay at skirmishes and trying to fight to one that was just, all right, we're going to control objectives, and that's going to get us our lead. And so I'd love to see what they do going into this set, especially with the adaptation that we're going to see from Samsara. What kind of bans they're going to have? Are they still going to take care of that Athena? Are they worried about it coming back? Was that really just the problem for them? And is Privative the one they need to control to make sure that they can flourish?
Right, when Thunderhead was able to match the lockdown and the CC, it really felt like the game plan just looked a little bit better. Of course, objective control with Circle of Protection and the ultimate from Ho-Yi as well to make sure that Thunderhead got all the objectives taken on their own. But just those instances of locking down individual targets and a lot of the replays that we saw just looked annoying. It was like a pull from Sylvanas into a Spirit Ball from ESET, into the knockout from Sylvanas, into the silence from ESET, and then a Circle of Protection. And like just the ability, or the inability to play the game if anyone on Samsara's beads or CC immunity was on cooldown. And that's important, getting your feet underneath yourself, realizing that you can draft a composition that works and gives you a great opportunity to move forward. And I think Pressure Gore, if you zoom out a little bit from this individual set, might start to mount in moments like this. Again, it's still round 1, nobody going home just yet. But Game 3, if you lose, your path becomes harder. You got no breathing room if you end up losing this game, if you're Samsara or you're Thunderhead. Let's waste time no longer. Samsara versus Thunderhead, picks and bans for a winner-take-all in this round. Game number 3, and Gilgamesh Gore continues to get banned out. Maybe not all that surprising. We know what Gilgamesh is capable of. I'd be hard-pressed to see a world where we see all that much of him here this weekend.
Especially, and it's so wild to think about, whether it's Winds of Shemesh and the slow and what he can bring there, but the drop kick is just really comfortable. His mobility, like his way of getting around the map. Yeah, it just makes sense to try and lock him down, slow down the jungle as much as possible. And that's where Samsara's been for a lot of this. I mean, we've seen Gilgamesh and we've seen the cleanup banned by them every single game so far. They're going to continue that trend. They really are trying to control that down, make things a little more comfortable for Jangaru, and ultimately we saw the duality of that Serket, right? In Game 1, it's like a 12.0 absolute menace throughout the game. Game 2, it has its moments, but it's not quite what I expected to see out of it, especially after what we had seen in Game 1. It gets controlled maybe a little too much there. And so I'm curious how they adapt and try to make that flourish again.
Man, Privative earned some respect on the Athena in Game 1, huh? The Thunderhead doesn't want to deal with it any further. Izanami also going to take a ban as well as Amaterasu. Gore, something with Ama is in the water here this weekend. Nobody wanted to play against Amaterasu over in the solo lane. Serket, though, has been maybe one of the most important picks of this set so far. 1 win, 1 loss, but now being played in all 3 games for Samsara. And if it remains in the jungle for Jangaru, I think that's a great opening pick for the Samsara team with how important the jungle has been early on.
And realistically, it's alongside that ESET ban, right? You get rid of 2 gods in the jungle for Samsara that are maybe going to be problematic or keep up with Serket pretty well. You get rid of the god that just gave her a lot of trouble, and now you gave Jangaru the opportunity once again to step forward. And realistically, Jangaru was going up against an Artio Medusa in game number 1. If you look at the 2 side lanes, those were some of his highest priority targets. And so now they're going to go back to that. If you bounce back and have a performance similar to that, those 2 gods should be quaking with fear.
It should be. Medusa continues to be prioritized in this set. The Artio now, actually, much like the Serket, the Artio is split a couple of games here, has been picked in all 3 of the games, 1 win, 1 loss. This was the answer to the RDO in Game 1 for Samsara, was this Cerberus, the ability to put Serket and Cerberus in a gank position against the RDO in Game 1. Just made life so much more difficult for Wengu in the solo lane for Thunderhead. Now, Persephone Gore has eaten 1 ban so far this set. Unpicked, unbanned in Game 1, banned in Game 2. And Persephone, for the first time in Season 9, is going to grab a pick here for Samsara in the mid lane.
And I will admit, just being impressed with this, because Persephone, I think she was in this weird area. You know, you go back when we used to see her mostly banned, was pre all of her kit changes, right? And then afterward, she was competitively banned for a little while teams got used to her, trying to figure her out. Since then, we've seen her like twice, maybe 3 times in the SPL. It was in Hurrywind, I think, was like the only person who really picked her up and played her at all. But she does still provide a lot for your team. I mean, if you're looking for damage, she's got it, and she's got it pretty decently. She's got safety. But realistically, I can ignore most of her kit. Just look at her ult. Her ult is still awesome in the middle of a team fight.
Yep.
Root one person, combine and tether down the team around them. It's really fun. They do have some auto attackers on the other side, so they might be able to get out of it semi-quickly on the side of Thunderhead. But that is a big threat to have to deal with if you are on the side of Thunderhead now. You have to worry about this Persephone, how like wild range that ult is, and how it can really change the tide of a fight.
Especially, you know, Persephone ult has always been great in the jungle and some of those more narrow engagements, but with some of the way I don't know if it's a new map at this point, but the map changed over the course of the last year, those jungle corridors feeling a little bit more slim, and so Persephone, even if you're offbeat just a little bit, still get some good value with that ultimate depending on where you are fighting. Sylvanas, you could say the same for him. Now we've seen some success for Sylvanas this weekend, but the first pick of the weekend and the first pick of the year, Gormizer, for Cabrakan, in a very important Game 3, mind you, and it looks like, I would say, I mean, Cabrakan support based on where we saw Cerberus go earlier on, but we have also seen Cabrakan in solo lane, and so maybe some flex potential between those two.
Yeah, I honestly think this is a fun glance to see what he's going to be able to provide. I mean, you always look at Cabrakan as lots of damage, pretty tanky, good at putting up walls, and those are not 3 things I want to go up against in most of my games. And you combine that, you know, if you throw him into the duo lane like you had just mentioned, if you do put him alongside this Hu Yi, all of a sudden you've got a very easy way to lock them to take way more damage out of the Suns than they'd like, plus make sure that Hu Yi can get even more continual damage. You start to throw him over into the mid 3v3 or any of these team fights, he's really good at chasing down and dealing with certain, you know, specifically maybe immobile people. Should be able to chase down a Kukul Khan, no problem. Wow. And then Medusa as well, even though she has that dash.
The rust.
Yeah, you gotta. How long has it been since he's been locked in? Hold on, I've got an excuse.
Say Kukul Khan 5 times fast. I don't think I could do it. Kukul Khan though, Gore. I said it 2 times fast.
There you go. We just need 3 more. Let's keep
Kukul Khan thrice, but this is not fast. We're beyond fast now. We're just saying it.
Yeah.
Very important for setup to be there for this pick, right? The Spirit of the 9 Winds paired with the 9 turns blessing could be a great opportunity to find some damage, and not unlike what we saw from Thoth in the Final Judgment and setting up around that big skill shot damage burst from the mid lane. It's going to be important. You've got Medusa, some lockdown from Ardio, Erlang Shen, Sylvanas. Pairing all that together might be the name of the game here for Thunderhead.
And I honestly think that they're going to be able to find, you look at the CC, right? Technically, you don't have the same thing from the Kukul Khan that you have out of the E set, but you do still have all of that beautiful, beautiful CC from an Erlang, from a Sylvanas, like you had highlighted. Their team fight, putting it together, is going to be very, very easy to do. That downside is Sylvanas, Erlang, well, I guess Erlang Shin does technically have a dash or something akin to a dash to get him out of there. Kukul Khan as well. They're going to be a little more susceptible, I think, to Persephone's damage and to the Cabrakan. So I think there's a lot of openings for Samsara to take advantage of the draft that Thunderhead have. And I think there's a lot of opportunities for Thunderhead to do the exact same thing we just saw. And granted, they'll have to change like little tiny things throughout it. But you've got someone with really easy clear in the mid lane who has a really good ult for securing objectives from very far away safely. Ultimately, you kind of just subbed them in to play the exact same style with some small self-sustain and self-peel changes.
Well, we've seen some different priority itemization in the mid lane. Kukul Khan, one that loves building Book of Thoth, And remember, towards the end of last year in Season 8, Book of Thoth plus Book of the Dead was like the item, Breastplate of Valor, things like that were so important in mid lane builds later on. And so if you're worried about Kukulkan diving and being killed off quickly, maybe that's the style of build we can see here. A very, very important game number 3 between Samsara and Thunderhead starts right now.
The good news between these two teams is that losing this one isn't the end of the world. It is a double elimination bracket, so if whatever team loses this, they still have another shot. But you always want to have to play the fewest games possible to qualify into the SPL, and a win here will set them on track to do so. It's J-Mac Mifflin and Doug here in game number 3 of set number 1. And again, we get some more new picks coming back out here. Kukulkan, probably the one to talk about the most here, as we do not get to see this guy very often. I was curious if he was going to go the Book of Thoth Rush like you would expect out of him, and he will do so here.
Yeah, but that is sacrificing the ability to go towards that double flat pen early on, which means that its mark is going to have a much slower power trajectory than Briz will on this Persephone. I'm expecting Briz, the second he finished up that secondary item, to get involved, try and rotate towards these side lanes, utilize the CC of that Grasping Death, whereas its mark, he's slow. He's going to have to finish Book of Thoth, which is an expensive item, start stacking it up, get some penetration a little bit later on, which means that it feels like Thunderhead is going to have a much slower approach to the game. Luckily for them, if they do want to go for the objective style, they still have great confirmation.
And the worst part about fighting a Kabrak in level 1 is if you're stuck inside the wave like this Sylvanas, you're going to eat a whole lot of damage because you're not going to be able to get out of the Tremors. Dark Wizard under fire. Shinigami needs one more basic, and he will find it one more time. Samsara can put themselves on the board.
No way.
Stuck inside the Tremors again. It's a double kill for Shinigami to really get this game going.
Man, this set has been the battle of the duo lane, hasn't it? One team is fighting solo kills or early kills in the lane. The next game, it's the other squad, and now Samsara going to go ahead and retake that throne of the duo lane. A double kill early on means that Shinigami is going to hit that power spike pretty quickly, and an early crusher could make it very difficult for Czechio to fight back into this lane, especially considering Medusa is not a god you pick to play passively. Medusa is a god that you pick to dash in with Lacerate, use those Viper shots, and get involved around level 3. I don't think that's going to be an option for him. As the second Shinigami goes back to base, the power differential is going to be very high.
Oh, Privative once again wants another fight. Maybe had that first ability pop there, but instead he'll just go for the Tremors one more time to help clear that wave. And no Tremors don't hit the hardest earlier on. We saw it showcased there with the lack of boots, with the lack of that movement speed that you get early in the game. It's almost impossible, especially if you get caught in the middle of those Tremors, to get yourself out. So while they don't deal a lot of damage individually, well, when you eat about 15, 20 ticks of it, that's when it really starts to stack up.
You think they took like 20 ticks right there? No
I mean,
way.
you can full charge that thing for 10 seconds, and it's every half second you take damage?
Was it you that argued with me that it's actually Kabrakan that's got the highest damage ability in the game?
It's 21 ticks of that you can take, I believe.
I hate you so much, man. Just
crazy.
let Ganesh have it, all right? Just let Ganesh have it with the Dharmic Pillars.
Now, here's the thing, though. Ganesh has to hit it on a god, because if it's not hitting a god, it does 40% reduced damage. So you're not going to get the full value out of it on something like a Kraken Tremorwood, which doesn't take reduced on the minions.
And that's what I deal with, Chad. Those are the pedantics that we get into.
What you deal with? Well,
those are the arguments we have on the casting team. As of now, I think it's very clear that Samsara has got the forefoot. They are the ones who are going to set the pace throughout the early portions of this game. So you got to expect them to keep up that pace. They need to be able to play with the lead while they've got it, because this is one of the largest leads we've seen accumulated in the early. In both games 1 and 2, Samsara did get off to an early kill lead, but they weren't able to transition into gold experience. Now, we're already looking at 1,000 2 minutes in.
It's a nice little lead that Samsara has built themselves up, and we saw some aggression over on that right-hand side, though because it is a Cerberus, that leap was able to get him out of danger pretty quickly up against Rayshadow and Wengu, and, well, Wengu didn't really have the health to kind of keep that action going. We do see teleports once again picked up by Solo, and it feels like this is just going to be the meta for a while, is this pick up teleport tier 1, max that out as soon as you can, maybe with that first item, and see what kind of impactful rotations you can make.
Yeah, and keep your eyes on Rayshadow as well. I mean, the second he finishes up this Crusher, I'm very excited to see him get involved, assuming that it is going to be a Crusher. Sure, Rayshadow could go towards one of the new Jotuns, the one that applies essentially a Sunder effect. Going to be very effective on this Erlong Shen. But as of now, it's been a very slow start for both of these junglers. That said, look where we've got Jangaru standing. He's deep in enemy territory.
He really wants to fish for a kill. Luckily for him, the obelisk hadn't spawned yet, so he doesn't get spotted on that topside rotation. But Thunderhead have a couple of members on their way to try and stop any potential pressure. But just as quickly as they rotate over, they make their way right back to the back end of the jungle. I'm not sure if they realize that there really was a gank going on here. But Jengaru doesn't want to continue in. Instead, he'll back his way up into the jungle one more time. And it is a double blink out of Samsara this time. One for the jungle, one for the support.
Yeah, so their initiation going to be incredibly strong, which is going to lend itself well to this aggressive style as it's Dark Wizard isolated, but man, just tanky. He's not falling to that. He's not going down that easy. Just a damage check for Samsara in the duo lane.
Yeah, he's able to make it out of there pretty nicely. Those Kabrakan walls could be a problem as the game goes on, though, because none of these gods are able to get through or over those walls. They're going to have to break them down or potentially go for a Phantom Shell if they want to get through that one some other means. So a nice way to at least stop the aggression, slow it down there over in that dual lane. That'll allow Thunderhead to be able to pick up that purple.
Yeah, Thunderhead taking a very slow approach to this game, even having its mark rotate over towards that purple buff, just ensuring that Samsara can't get aggressive on this side of the map, means that Thunderhead really have kind of identified that the strength point of this composition is not going to be at the 10-minute mark. It's probably not going to be around the 15-minute mark. We're keeping our eyes on Thunderhead once we start to approach the late game. We have not had a whole lot of opportunity to watch late game in this set. It's generally around that 10 to 12-minute mark where both of these teams start to group up around objectives, and Samsara having the stronger early game composition is going to lend itself very well to the pacing that has been established in the set so far. Can Thunderhead, in a Game 3 situation, completely change the face of how these matches have been played? They're going to have to if they want to win with this comp.
Another item that we're starting to see a little bit of extra popularity on after its buffs has been the Stone of Binding coming out of Snatty one more time in the solo lane. Got a little buff to its protections, and every little bit of extra prots helps when it comes to that solo lane. Getting, I believe now it's 35 of both physical and magical. And we've seen that rise, and we've seen one more blink here in the mid lane. Dark Wizard, though, doesn't have a way to get out. The ultimate from Mark will help him out just a little bit, but now he's got another cage to deal with. This time it's Persephone's, and Jengaru will walk in and be able to steal that one away with that Deathsbane.
Dark Wizard was not allowed to move for 9 entire seconds. He was just locked down, just like Jengaru, but the ultimate from Ray Shadow comes out just too late. Jengaru slips out of trouble. Had he been connected with that 9 turns blessing, I mean, Jengaru's just dead there. Luckily, he's able to escape narrowly and make that a 1-for-0 trade favoring Samsara.
And unfortunate for Dark Wizard, that's all that Mark could do to help him was throw out Spirit of the Nine Winds and just hope that it hits somebody.
It did.
Hope that it can slow them, deal enough damage.
Well, it didn't.
But it did not. It was not quite enough just yet. He does have Book of Thoth online, starting to get some stacks. So we'll see that big power spike kind of come through then. You get a lot of power once it is stacked up. Kukulkan specifically gets to double dip the pass of that with his own. So we'll see a nice large power spike once that's finished. But like you were talking about earlier, until that's finished and until you start getting that second, third item, it's going to be a long early game for Thunderhead.
No way.
And maybe a long dual lane for Czechio if this is going to keep up.
Whoa.
Yet again, the bounce of Shinigami. He was going to get out of there until that hit, and now he doesn't need to because Privet is here to help shut him down.
I just can't think that was like intended.
No,
No way
it was
my man
not.
was
He
lining
was
that up.
leaving.
He's like, easy bounce, No, he was faking a leave to force Czechio to walk into a position where he gets caught by the secondary tick, and then it sets up very well for Privative to walk on over and finish off exactly what Shinigami had started. Samsara off to a 4-0 start, massive gold lead, experience starting to leak in their favor as well. One of the largest separations being in mid and ADC, one level for both Briz and Shinigami. But so far, we have not seen Samsara feel confident enough to group up around these objectives and start forcing fights around the Gold Fury proper, despite being willing to force fights literally everywhere else on the map. It doesn't matter if you're in your tier 1 tower in duo or the center of the map, it's always Privative going in with this ultimate and setting up for his squad. Maybe Samsara concerned about the steal potential that its Mark has got.
Well, Ray and Mark want something here. Even Dark Wizard rotates over to mid to maybe try and catch Privative or to catch Briz off guard. But they do not. There'll be a nice little ward there to kind of spot them out. And so everybody from Samsara and Thunderhead will retreat back and get back towards their own farm. Once again, Privative not going for a Gauntlet of Thieves. It's been an item that's been somewhat absent. We saw it last game on the Sylvanas from Dark Wizard. We'll see it again this time. But it's a very early sovereignty out of Privative this time around.
Yeah, I think it's just speaking to the pace of the game that Privative wants to set. He wants to get involved immediately. Doesn't want to have to buy Thebes, wait for it to stack up, and then get his defense. Instead, it's Sovereignty. All right, I'm Cabrakan. Let's get involved, and he's doing it now.
Let's get right involved once again against Dark Wizard specifically. Locked in one cage, locked in another one. Spirit of the Nine Winds will hit just Privative, but Privative does not care about the damage.
No
they don't
way.
have quite enough for Dark Wizard. He was so tanky under that ultimate, so tanky with the help of those whiffs that he somehow manages to slip through the walls of the Cabrakan and get out.
Yeah, Dark Wizard just a little bit too tanky. Shinigami gonna try his best to take that 1v1
Part two.
yet again, but is not gonna connect with the stun this time around. I gotta call him out though. I'm gonna do it. Briz would just show the most fear I have ever seen in my life. The Ray Shadow uses 9 turns Blessing on the escape just to give himself a heal. Briz, 3 country miles away, just pops his beads on reaction to the sound effect. There's props to be given in that heads up play. You heard it, you beads, you didn't want to get CC'd. But no awareness and realizing that the Ray Shadow was nowhere near him has created a scenario now where Thunderhead, who is playing from a very large deficit at this portion of the game, have now got a clear target to engage on. Briz, no beads for 2 minutes.
Look, for the last like 6 to 8 months of mid laners' lives, it's been that god in their face. So respect knowing that, hey, that's probably going to be hitting me, but like you say here, you know, a little too far away, just kind of a reactionary beads just because of how conditioned he's used to be to fighting a god like that. Jengaru does go for the Jotun's Wrath for his first item. We'll see if he upgrades that, but we haven't seen a Jotun's Wrath upgrade just yet. We've only seen that breastplate back there in game number 2. Curious to see if we'll see even more, especially with Privative now going towards this Heartwood. Amulet of Silence could be a solid pickup as a tier 4.
It could be, but generally these upgrades that are a little bit less impactful, I'm talking if you're not talking about upgrading like Rod as a Hootie or your Deathbringers of the world, you want to wait a little bit longer to spend that gold elsewhere.
Ray and Czechio want to fight against Shinigami.
Surely
it's the
not.
2 level 10s versus the 1 level 12, a jump out. And with Ray Shadow's ultimate expended, he's going to have to get away. But now he doesn't have the ultimate to help him out. But he's got Czechio with a nice Petrify. And
He's
Primitive
in.
does not care about the tower. He does not care about your life. He doesn't care about your health bar. He'll dive under that tier 1 with the rest of Samsara to pick up 2 quick kills for Samsara.
Primitive's just an animal, dude. This guy has got zero concern. He's Wing. I mean, you're right. That key has got to be taped down. Can we get an admin in there and check out this man's keyboard and make sure he hasn't got like
he's got a
just
rock on that thing.
just somebody else holding it down for him, because he is yet to let off the gas. It's reminiscent of the Athena game we saw earlier on. If Primitive thinks there's a 10% chance that he can find a kill, he's walking in regardless.
Gold Fury started up and not so quickly going down. It finally will go through. Spirit of the Nine Winds just a tad off the mark by Mark. And now he's the one in danger as Rengar is chasing him out. A leap in, but a quick shell from Dark Wizard just in case it was going to go through. But Jengaru didn't have ultimate, so there was no kill there for Mark.
Man, 11.5 minutes in, 6-0. Gold's looking pretty tough. Dark Wizard forced to use the shell defensively after a fight. Still doesn't even have the Thebes stacked up just yet. Whereas on the other side, Privative, 2-level lead, already finished up that Heart Ward that you were talking about earlier, and also Sovereignty. So his defense through the roof, his initiation potential through the roof as well. Thunderhead have got to find something on the map to get a little bit of gold in their favor. Be it around this Pyromancer, if maybe they can make a sneaky play there. A little bit less so an option now that Gold Fury's already been taken, so Samsara can dedicate themselves to playing this right-hand side. Or maybe look towards some of these tier 1 towers. Some rotations from Ray Shadow could make it a lot easier in the duo lane, but as of now, it's Samsara in again.
Quick beads up against Mark. Mark doesn't have the
pull.
ult to get himself out. Wizard helps him a little bit with the pull, but it doesn't help him enough as Jengaru chases him down. Have a nice initiation by Privative. He will upgrade that hardware. It won't be the Amulet of Silence, though. It will be the Amulet of the Stronghold. So instead of getting the Silence with the basic after the thing stacks up, instead you just get more magical prots based off the amount of physical that you have. You get 10% of your physical prots will be additional magical protections here. So I'm curious how much Fizz prot Privative is willing to build in, despite the fact he's going up against a triple magical comp.
Worth noted that the exact wording is converted. It's not just additional. They are taking away some and giving you some elsewhere, which means that, sure, he's got it now. He's going to get a little bit more going forward, but Privative maybe keeping his eyes towards the Ray Shadow with this selection. Czechio going to have a very hard time dealing with Privative once we see a little bit more defense there as well. So I'm very excited to see how this one kind of shifts up how Privative elects to play.
Well, will be some aggression from Shinigami once again at this purple buff. It's a 4-level deficit between these hunters. And once again, Czechio is feeling the pain of being so far behind for his entire jungle on his side of the map being stripped away. Samsara relentless in dealing with this Hunter, not just in game number 1, but here in game number 3 as well.
Look, Shinigami has been jumping aggressively onto Czechio consistently on cooldown for the last 4 minutes. Somebody from Thunderhead has got to rotate over and make use of these aggressive plays. If Hoyi's jumping in, that means he can't jump out, which makes it very easy for guys like Ray's Shadow to lock him down, to stick in close. Wangu's already got the upgraded teleport. Maybe he can make some rotations. But who has it been making the rotations so far in this lane? It's Privative. Consistently. It's always Privative being on the forefront. He's always there in the fight first. Every single time Samsara has taken an engagement, look at Privative's positioning. He's in front of his entire team, walling in at least 2 members. It's a massive initiation for his squad. But every time he uses it, if it's down and it doesn't hit pay dirt, Thunderhead is not exploiting that fact. They're not going in and trying to get involved while Samsara are weakened or missing resources. Instead, it has been a consistent effort just to tread water for Thunderhead, which, to their credit, you're playing from a very large deficit. It's not going to be very easy to find these opportunities. But if they keep allowing the game to just happen to them, Samsara are going to continue pulling ahead, which is why I love to see Thunderhead at least heat check the Pyromancer.
And they heat checked it, but that's all they're going to do is just check it, and instead it'll be Samsara starting it up. Wangu is here, so keep your eyes open onto this RDO, but a quick retreat and a quick beads out of the solo lane or two. Very scared with where he may have been thrown from Jengaru's grasp. So instead, he'll get out. Czechio left alone over in that duo lane, though. He's down 3 levels. He needs all the farm that he can get, so he'll push up some waves by himself. Maybe even this tier 1 tower to try to get himself back in. But the rest of his team, they got to worry about what's going on in mid lane. Dark Wizard is getting CC chained to death. He's still alive, and a massive taunt from Ray's Shadow pulls everybody back in, but Briz is the one to finally deal the final blow until Ray's Shadow goes in and trades his life to at least get 1.
Privative trades his for 2, though, and that's the support, so that's a high-value trade. Maybe worth noting, good eyes Doug. Czechio picks up a lot of levels, just pushing out those waves, as well as a tier 1 and half of a tier 2 tower. If Czechio is able to stick around and finish that one off, would have been a massive win for his squad. At the end of the day, I'd say about a net wash, considering the experience deficit. Thunderhead at least putting themselves on the board. But what's spawning in just a couple of seconds? It's the Primal Fury. I don't think Thunderhead can allow this one to go down without a fight, and they're going to have to fight in 7,500 down.
And they're going to need Mark's ultimate to be the one to steal this one out. Czechio, even with the Petrify, could get some good damage up against it. They've got good, long-range damage to get in there and to where they don't have to commit their entire selves to steal it away. But that's also 2 of your biggest ultimates when it comes to a fight, and trying to use that to secure not always your best plan, but maybe that's the one that they need to try and get back in this game.
Yeah, maybe. Just anything they can do to slow down this death march that Samsara has been on. It's been a slow grouping, though. I was expecting Samsara to just kind of walk in with Abandon and just pull the Gold Fury itself, but maybe the Oracle Vision dissuading them a bit. It's Mark, isolated in the jungle, has to play safely here. Luckily for him, Privative does not have the blink available, so he allows Mark to walk out of this one. And Samsara will be starting the Primal Fury in the vision of Thunderhead, unconcerned.
And Mark already went back to base because now their long-range steal, their long-range secure potential is completely out the window, and that allows Samsara to take a free Primal Fury. That one goes down nice and easily to the team in blue here. They continue to extend up that lead, 8,500 gold and XP, and still ever climbing, and has not stopped since minute 1 of this game. Since that first double kill over in dual lane, Samsara have been on a parade throughout this entire game.
And desynced neutral objectives means that Thunderhead do not have much response to make on the map. Czechio's wave is at least pushed up to his own tier 2 tower, so he can pick up a little bit more farm, but Wangu can't step up to his wave. It's too close to Samsara's side of the map. You really don't love Mark's odds stepping up that far in mid, maybe drop a tornado and walk away, because if Privative just shows up, a blink ultimate engage is going to be very difficult to deal with on the side of Thunderhead. That said, at least Dark Wizards has got himself the Phantom pickup, so he can at least mitigate 1 wall.
And there's going to be those walls dropping through. The shell is popped to allow them to go through, and Privative has finally been eating the damage that he's been deserved this entire game, but Briz trades out and makes it a 1-for-1, but Shinigami comes through and puts in the big damage with Snatty to grab 3 kills in the fight so far for only now 2. Actually, no, it's just 1. Now finally will be 2 as Gengaru does go down to Mark, but it's only Ray Shadow left alive to fight against 3, and there is no hope for him to get out of here as Shinigami picks up the double kill. They pick up the deicide, and they really show Thunderhead what's what.
Yeah, Shinigami goes unaddressed in the entirety of that team fight. And when you've got this style of build with a Deathbringer finished up already, you've got to have earned the respect of Thunderhead. But instead it was, all right, we got to shut down Primitive. He's deep in our back line, and they do so very well. But then if you look at the rest of the engagement, it's Gengaru creating space. He may have traded out his own life, but he zones 2 members of Thunderhead, creating a scenario where Shinigami can slowly work his way throughout the entirety of the Chaos team. The target selection from Thunderhead just hasn't been there. They're not selecting him, really. They're waiting for the fight to come to them and just fighting whoever's close enough, whereas they need to get onto these priority targets. They can't allow Briz to walk through an entire team fight at 50% HP. He can't just walk out like that. I don't think Shinigami took any damage from enemy gods. The most damage he took in the last 3 minutes was from the Fire Giant proper. Thunderhead have got to utilize their dive composition to at least set up some CC, burn away some of these defensive relics, and then you've got great follow-up potential on the secondary rotation of CC. But if you're looking at it, Shinigami's got both relics still available. Ray Shadow wasn't able to connect his ultimate onto a priority target. So in this next team fight, Thunderhead are still going to have to work through all of these priority resources despite having already lost out in an engagement.
I mean, I'm looking across the board. I'm seeing full item up for Hunter, full item up for support, mid lane basically a full item here. Tied in the way of the jungle at the moment. Gengaru is still, kind of at that 1-1 at those tiers. Solo lane pretty even here. But I'm really looking at where the brunt of the damage has been done here between Briz, Primitive, and Shinigami. All full items up and ahead. 4-0 and 7 for Shinigami on this Ho Yi. And I'm just waiting for him to go back and maybe finish up that Deathbringer to see where he goes. But instead, he gets his Death Embrace, make sure he gets a little bit of extra lifesteal, because he is a little bit lacking with this build in Sustain.
Yeah, well, no longer. Death's Embrace going to shore up all of that, HP and mana sustain going forward. Fire Giant should at least help out with that a bit as well. So, Thunderhead have not really got the advantage in a poke war anymore. They had great sustain from Sylvanas if these fights went a little bit longer, but now Samsara with just Fire Giant kind of match up to that level of sustain on their own. That said, there's still plenty of towers on the map, so this could be a situation where Samsara uses the first Fire Giant just to clear out all of the towers. It's a 4-1 split as of now, Gengaru working his way through the center of the map. But it doesn't seem like they're going to concern themselves. Samsara, that is, with the right-hand side. It's just Phoenixes all day.
Primitive scares Thunderhead a little bit. He pops that one, walks into the tower and goes, hey, you know what? I don't actually want to be here. I'm just going to walk away. And you saw a quick little root come out there from Wengen to maybe slow him down. Dark Wizard, I could see it in his eyes. He was like, all right, guys, I'm ready with my Phantom if he comes in. But for now, he will get a hold on to it while Samsara continue to clear out minions and wait for that next wave to start pushing up towards that Phoenix.
Gengaru does a good job of distracting Ray Shadow. A 2-level lead here, and the ability to remove healing means that Ray Shadow should not love his odds in that 1v1. And with that split, it's Primitive in first.
Primitive goes in. He only finds Dark Wizard with the ultimate, but a lot of turnaround damage. Primitive is low, and he'll have to get his way out of there. But Shinigami picks up one before Primitive goes down. Phoenix still under fire by just Shinigami. Briz gets the alternate timeline proc to save his life, and the Phoenix now continues to be under siege by Samsara. Shinigami has not left the line, and he'll make sure that one goes down before the rest of his team can finally disengage from the fight.
So it's a 1-for-1 trade, but Bird goes to Samsara. Tier 2 taken out in mid means that gold has largely leaked in their favor as well. We're up to 16,000 favoring Samsara at this point.
Yeesh.
That is hard to play into. 16,000 gold's like generally something we see like 40 minutes into a game for a team that's been struggling to close out a match. Not 22 minutes in, when you're still legitimately buying items. Thunderhead do a good job of really slowing down the push, though. Only losing out on that left side Phoenix, although being the most important Phoenix, not going to make it very easy for subsequent Fire Giant defenses, is probably better than they could have expected considering the deficit they were playing into on that base defense. Thunderhead buy themselves a little bit more time. Once Czechio starts to approach level 20, once we start to finish up some of these penetration items for its mark, these fights very well could start to turn around a little bit. Samsara, they're approaching maximum strength. I mean, we're getting to that 6th item. Relics are starting to get finished up as well. So if Thunderhead could just hold on for a little bit longer, there might be some more intrigue in this game than a glance might show you.
This might be the most important wave, at least, that Thunderhead need to deal with. It's now the Oni fire minions on the left-hand side, so there's no chance that they can let those ones pour in. That'll clear through every single minion wave. That'll do a hefty chunk to the Titan, too, if left alone. So for now, they are going to be forced to deal with these Oni waves. They're just going to have to give up yet another objective to Samsara. Pyromancer goes their way. But all this time does buy for at least Briz to try and get this alternate timeline back off a cooldown. It is a long one, 6 minutes when that one procs before you can get another opportunity. And we're 2 minutes now through it. But I don't think Samsara wants to wait the full duration to kind of close this game out.
Got some good news, though. This being one of the longer games of this set means we get to talk about some more new items. Tier 4 finished up for Jengaru. It's going to be the Jotun's Ferocity, I believe, is this one. Yeah, it is Ferocity. And that is essentially going to apply a Sunder effect to whoever you mark with your basic attack. You mark somebody, and then if you hit them continually with abilities or basics, it's going to apply a stacking effect, or if you take damage from them as well, that is going to give you additional percentage damage to whoever you connect with. On a god like Jengaru who's playing, Sir Ket, you're kind of loving that. You hit somebody with the CC, you're applying all that additional damage, and then you're already playing a burst-focused god. It's going to be very wild.
Well, Thunderhead's going to need a lot of help, especially their support. Spirit of the Nine Winds does clip Briz, though, and that's going to put him out for a little while, but he does manage to pick up a second kill. It's a double for the mid laner, despite being low health, and he wants even more. Wengu is on the run and getting chunked out by this Persephone, but Czechio is right behind, and I'm not sure where he's going or what he's trying to help with, because it's a triple kill for Briz. 4 down on the side of Thunderhead, and it could be 5 as Privative will just W key at Mark and throw a teleport from Sandy just to guarantee that this mid laner goes down.
Yeah, Privative got credit for the kill, and he made sure that Mark is going to know about it. Drops the taunt there. And just to harken back to the first game, Privative said, I am so sorry for what I'm about to do to these players. Yeah, I mean, it happened. He did it to him, and he doesn't seem too sorry, if you ask me.
Well, hey, Dark Wizard's back up. And that's going to be their one shining beacon of hope to try and defend against this Titan. Briz is still low, but ultimate hits Dark Wizard. He'll respond with his own, at least catch Privative here for a little bit. But it's just one lone Sylvanas to defend against the 5 strong of Samsara. But Samsara are low after that last fight. They didn't get the Fire Giant. And it was just the one lone tree to defend.
Yo, Dark Wizard goes absolutely crazy. This man is going wild and nuts simultaneously to be able to put up a defense there. Being a little bit glib, I am very surprised to see Samsara elect not to go towards the finish there. There was about 20 seconds left on the next respawn that would have been a genuine threat to their ability to close out that fight. Maybe Briz being so low on mana and dedicating so many resources towards Dark Wizard and not hitting that kill means that Samsara don't want to leave it up to risk, especially considering we're like 20,000 some odd gold in the lead. Might as well just regroup, head over towards the Fire Giant. You've shown that you're still very capable of winning fights in the neutral territory. So I don't think Thunderhead's going to be very willing to step up and take yet another engagement around the Fire Giant proper. So Samsara, they back up, they take out that mid-Phoenix and pick themselves up the largest neutral objective yet again.
Fire Giant down to a quarter and will go down with no struggle at all to Samsara. That one will go nice and easily, nice and clean. And an envenomed Deathbringer for Shinigami gets picked up one. For those of you who may not have heard the news, Poison Star is gone, and now it's a glyph for Deathbringer, so you can get some extra some extra damage reduction up against whenever you hit somebody with a critical strike. That person will deal less damage to you. Though you do need to get a crit, but he's 3 crit items in, so he's going to be critting pretty often.
Yeah, it's going to apply a 10% slow for every crit, and it makes them deal 15% less damage output.
He's going to need every little bit of help there, and so is Wengu. Dark Wizard with another big ultimate, but it's circle upon circle upon circle here for Samsara. They yank them through,
dude, stop them.
And Primitive and Briz are teaming up to do all the damage necessary. Double kill for the mid laner, and only Ray, Shadow, and Mark left alive. No ultimates this time for them to try and defend up against the 5 strong of Samsara. And maybe now this time, Mifflin, Game 3 can close out as Samsara goes straight for the throat and take down the Titan to end our first set of the SPL qualifier play-ins.
Was that easy? It only took like 3 auto attacks to kill the Titan. You could have thought that maybe we see that 2 minutes earlier, but instead Samsara, again, take the methodical route throughout the entirety of this one. Privative goes through that last team fight without taking a single bit of damage. I'm pretty sure he was 100% HP, despite sitting in the middle of the entirety of the enemy team, just slamming the ground. That was a dominant performance from Samsara's dual lane, start to finish.
And Privative Game number 1 showed us just how strong he could be on the Athena, just reminded us just how good that god is. Then comes out with the Cabrakan here in Game 3, and also reminds us just how good that god can be, even in the support role. We've been seeing more often than not more damage builds coming out of like solo lane and jungle out of him, but kind of getting a nice little throwback here to the Cabrakan support really shows just what kind of threat that this one player has. And with that one, Samsara take the victory in set number 1, and we'll take it to a break and come back to the desk.
Dominant game 1 and a dominant game 3. Samsara able to take the 2-1 victory over Thunderhead in their first game, or their first set rather, here of this weekend. Avoid dropping down to the losers bracket and move themselves on to the next round on the upper side of the bracket. And that is very, very important. And the fashion they were able to win these games, very important as well. In Gormizer, this is a knockdown, drag-out game 1. A little speed bump in game 2.
Little speed bump.
Little speed bump in game 2, and then Samsara right back to game 1 fashion here in game 3. Snowball this one out of control. Might have been able to end a little bit sooner, but let's cross our T's, dot our I's, and make sure we're moving on.
And realistically, I think you get to see a good adaptation from them as well, because what goes wrong in game 2, there's a lot of control coming from the mid lane. They got rid of the E set. All of a sudden, it became a much easier time against a very similar composition to deal with in a lot of these team fights. Plus, you have some really, really good performances. This Persephone goes 8-0-8. Shinigami goes 5-0-13. But most of them don't die. Privet is the only one who really dies on that. And honestly, as a support, that's kind of what you want to do. In a lot of these fights, it's better for you to give your life and let them get out of there. So they just played that one clean. I mean, there was a point I remember looking at you. It was like 7-0, and I was like, so that's the kind of game we're in for here.
Yep. Yeah, just the way that game started felt like that was the direction we were headed. The Thunderhead carries just sat on, it felt like, from minute 1 there in that game. And so that's another instance for the Samsara team. As we start to gather data on these teams, not only their picks and bans, but the way they like to play, that ability to get into the back line consistently. I look at Jangaru as well. Jangaru played Surcat over and over and over again in this set, and it looked really good. A pivotal piece of the puzzle here for Samsara was their jungler Jangaru, and as luck would have it, Jangaru standing by with me now for the post-game interview. Jangaru, first and foremost, congrats. You get the first set win of the week out of the way. I want to start. You're playing on controller, correct?
I am.
Do you feel like you're giving a face, a voice to controller players everywhere playing here on LAN with the controller?
Yeah, it's a little different, especially competing with other people that are on keyboard and mouse.
Sure.
So I feel like it's definitely, something people probably look down on, but me, I personally I've always felt comfortable, and I feel like it's a good place to show it.
Look, you played at an incredibly high level. And you look fantastic here in game number 1. Surcat, you get Surcat 3 games in a row. Do you like the character enough that you're going to be excited playing Surcat maybe all week long? Because you look too good on that pick to maybe move away from it if it's not banned. Do you like the pick enough?
I think I have no choice, but I feel like I'm okay with playing Surcat. It's nothing that I can't really.
Right.
I feel like I can do it.
That's a good way to be. Talk to me a little bit about game 2, because game 1 is a steamroll for you guys. Game 3 is a steamroll for you guys. What goes on there in game 2 that gave you some trouble?
I think game 2, we got a little bit too experimental. I feel like we weren't playing, obviously, how we were game 1. It was just a little stuff. Even with, like, our draft, I didn't feel like it was something we normally would draft. So I guess it was a wash in our end. The game 3, we kind of got back onto it. And
get the feedback underneath yourselves. It looked really good. Congrats again, getting your first win of the week underway. I'll let you go back and celebrate with the team. Best of luck in your future matches.
Thank you.
A good head on his shoulders, obviously giving a face as we joke to the controller players everywhere. And I hope you didn't take it as like looking down on it. I think the ability to play on the controller at the level that Jangaru just did, amazing, and I think a fantastic look for the Samsara team, regardless of input, is to have a jungler playing that good of Smite moving forward this week.
I mean, the KDA in games 1 and 3 should speak for themselves based on what we got to see. But even in game 2, which was a loss, it was positive, I believe, for the Surcat. So it was really good 3 games in a row from the jungle, and a really good, again, adaptation. The way they played game 1, the way they played game 3, and if you want to take them at face value, the experimentation maybe not going exactly how they would have liked there in game number 2. I think what we've gotten to see out of Samsara is, again, a team that I expect and anticipate to play pretty big upset throughout this weekend. I think they are one of those teams that is going to come in. You have a lot of players that you're going to recognize on it, but you don't know what fully to expect out of them. And I think they're going to be able to take a lot of the top teams, the higher seeded teams, by surprise because of that.
Well, they have a chance.
Yeah, we'll find out.
A big old upset if Samsara is able to find it in their next matchup. Remember, your prize for beating Thunderhead in your first set of the week is moving on to play the Oni Homies tomorrow. So, but is there some confidence now instilled, Gore? Because especially in a tournament like this, it's double elim.
Yep.
But as we move further on in the weekend, it's got to be that any given Sunday mentality, right? If you're drawing parallels, to the NFL. Any given Thursday, maybe, if Samsara is playing well enough, tomorrow they'll go up against the Oni homies, which will be a ridiculously fun matchup. But moving on for the rest of today, Gore, I think the next one that we've got, you and I are going to jump over and cast this one that I'm looking forward to as well. And Mifflin, I'm sure he'll talk about it on the desk, this nobody's favorite versus reverse card match. Miff thinks we're underselling this nobody's favorite team pretty heavily. Miff, I think, and he'll explain it on the desk, feels like this team has got a real shot at moving on throughout the bracket. With a win here, they would move on to face the Winter Dogs tomorrow. And so Miff, I think, very high on this nobody's favorite team, and we'll get to see him in action up next.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch this squad as well, just because, again, it's a lot of names that you will recognize and should recognize, and then some that it might not seem as common, especially depending on like whether or not you're grinding ranked at the same time that they are. But like from what I have heard, not just from Miff, but even last night when we were talking about it on Backliners, like it is caught my attention. This team is someone that I'm going to keep my eye on and see what they're going to be able to provide for us today, because it should be entertaining.
Yeah, of course, nobody's favorite. Maybe underselling.
Honestly, they might be everybody's favorite.
Everyone's
really.
favorite. Yeah, Elian on that team. I believe we'll be talking to him prior to that matchup. I think it's Schlemmy on that team that Mifflin is just so excited for in my Zen dashboard. I mean, that's a roster the next desk will break down. I think carries a lot of expectations with it, and you're right, Gore. Maybe everyone's favorite, but can't undersell what we just saw from Samsara, the ability to come out in an event like this. You talk about pressure, but really the bounce back from this team and the chemistry that they share after a tough game to realize that the experimentation just kind of didn't work. Moving forward is going to be very important for them. You're going to face some adversity tomorrow against the Oni homies, and I think they'll have the ability to deal with it.
And realistically, you're going up against an SPL team, so that one does mean detrimental. They are, they've played against the best of the best for a consistently long time now. Last year they had that entire experience, but also means there's a lot of footage on them. You know what kind of gods they like to play. You know what their style is. So theoretically, you're going to be able to come into that set understanding a little bit of what you need to do to control them.
And that'll be tomorrow. We get to see that matchup. The next matchup today, though, it'll be nobody's favorite versus reverse card. Don't go anywhere. The Season 9 play-in tournaments. Be right back.